The next show will start in 1 minute.
Media, an illusion of choice. Do you know that only 6 corporations own 90% of the American media? The most powerful special interest group in Washington is the media. The media is the gateway of information to the American public, and any politician strives to reach the public through the media. Thus, the media have a great say in which politician is granted a voice. To provide a historical perspective, in 1983, 90% of the American media was controlled by 50 companies. Through a history of mergers and acquisitions, these companies have concentrated their control over what we see, hear, and read. In many cases, these companies control everything, from initial production to final distribution. Now only 6 companies own 90% of our media. Our main source of information and cultural output is coming from these 6 giant conglomerates: Comcast, News Corp, Disney, Viacom, Time Warner, and CBS. Profit maximization is the ultimate goal of every corporation. And if that goal becomes entangled with reporting the truth in the news, what will ultimately win out? What happens when there is no one left to compete with? When one company owns everything in your town, does the people in your town have a voice in their media anymore? Would they hear or watch content that is relevant to their lives? Probably not. The more independent media outlets a community has, the more different viewpoints will be presented on air. And the question that arises, do we really have a choice in our media?
PragerU says 60% of their audience is under 35. About 35 PragerU videos are currently restricted.
When we first realized that our videos were being restricted, there were about 15 videos that were restricted, and that was a year and a half ago. And since then, not only has the issue not been resolved, there's actually been 20 more videos restricted, and currently it's closer to 40 videos that are being restricted.
On December 18th last year, Twitter permanently suspended my account and the account run by my organization, American Renaissance.
A campaign ad banned by Twitter. Representative Marsha Blackburn talking abortion and her pro-life views that Twitter deemed inflammatory.
Yesterday, Alex Jones became an unperson, straight out of the plot of George Orwell's 1984, where when someone broke the rules of the power structure, they would have all evidence of their previous existence completely deleted. Which is what happened yesterday when YouTube, Facebook, and iTunes completely wiped all the videos, posts, and podcasts from Alex Jones and InfoWars. And regardless what you think of him or InfoWars content, this is the digital equivalent of book burning and sets a horrifying precedent for mass censorship by the big tech companies.
Streaming live from the Paul and Catherine Ranke Memorial Studio, this is TV Free Baltimore. Support for TV Free Baltimore comes from viewers like you. Become a TV Free Baltimore member by visiting patreon.com/TVFreeBaltimore.
As a public service, TV Free Baltimore provides a digital soapbox for those the mainstream media ignores. The opinions expressed in this live stream are not necessarily those of the owners, management, or underwriters of TV Free Baltimore. Furthermore, TV Free Baltimore streams hyper-local content focusing on politics and entertainment in the Baltimore viewing area.
You're watching Maryland Politics here on TV Free Baltimore.
Good evening and welcome to this episode of Maryland Politics. I'm Charles Wesley, your host for this episode, and I'm very happy to say that we are going to be talking about something that's very important to those that live in Baltimore County. And tonight's guest is Steve McIntyre, and he's running for the House of Delegates in District 42A. Welcome to the show, Steve.
Thank you.
Now, we've had you on before, and also during our streams. You know, for those people that are have been watching our streams, we feature your stuff all the time because I think that you're the subject matter expert in what they want to do to Baltimore County. Now, in my point of view, they want to make Baltimore County the new Baltimore City. The people that are running Baltimore City, their policies have failed miserably. And, you know, when you're a Democrat, all you want to do is say, well, there's a problem, it hasn't been fixed, so we need more money. Well, the tax base in Baltimore City is destroyed because the productive people have left the city and moved out to the surrounding counties. So now what the politicians want to do is stick their hands into the people's pockets that fled the city or grew up in the county.
I think it's one of the most unreported stories. It's definitely insider baseball, but there's a merger going on between the Baltimore City machine and the Baltimore County machine.
Completely
and here
agree.
In Baltimore County, you know, the machine politicians that we have, Olszewski, you know, the East Side used to be the base of the Democratic Party.
Right.
You know, he inherited his seat. And Lafferty. Lafferty is lifelong. That's the guy I'm running against. He's a lifelong machine politician and, you know, hyper partisan. And
well, how about Jim Smith?
Yeah, I mean, you know, here's a guy.
Explain that to our viewers.
I mean, that's how the mayor of Baltimore got elected. Is Jim Smith, former Baltimore County executive, who now is basically migrated to Baltimore City, and has been funding, the city mayor. In her race, and also, of course, he funded Lafferty, the guy I'm running against, when he first ran.
Right.
So, you know, he's been something of a kingmaker, and he's firmly, since Pew came in, been involved in Baltimore City now.
Right,
so.
right, and I suspect he's getting a big salary by being on her staff.
Yeah. It's like $180,000, something ridiculous.
Must be nice. You throw money into her campaign, help her get elected, and then she gives you a big paying job.
I'm new to the whole politics thing, but I think that's kind of how it works.
Yeah. But we're here today to talk about the future of Baltimore County. And 20 years ago, a book came out called Baltimore Unbound, which TV Free Baltimore, which I did a critique of that book. Yep. When I read that book, I found it to be glaringly two things. First, racist, blatantly racist, and also very authoritarian. The racist part was the author basically makes the argument that a good portion of the city's problems, both real and imagined, can be blamed on the concentration of black poverty within the political boundaries of Baltimore City.
Right.
So he lays out a program whereby they will take people that are on Section 8 and take them out of the worst neighborhoods of Baltimore City and move them into the best neighborhoods in the Baltimore County. But what he argues in the book is that this program is only for black people. If you're poor and white, go pound sand, brother.
That is strange.
Yeah.
It's very explicit.
And then when he lays out the whole scheme about taxes, the regional approach to where taxes would go up in the surrounding counties so they could lower the taxes in Baltimore City?
Yep.
Oh my God.
The thing about that author is, he makes these arguments, but he's also been proven historically wrong. I mean, he predicted Philadelphia, Washington, D.C., New York, and this is in the mid-'90s,
right,
that they would descend into downward spirals unless they were able to annex their suburbs and
right,
effectively form a region. And all three of those cities have thrived.
Right.
And this is the fallacy of central planning. And this is really what got Baltimore City into the problem in the first place in 1950. As they embarked on this huge public housing program, which was one of the largest in the country. And right as the population was beginning to decline, and the reason the population was beginning to decline, well, you didn't need to manufacture things in 8-story buildings anymore.
Right.
So the industry moved out, and with that, the low-skilled jobs. And we had brought in, Baltimore had been a major center of armaments production, munitions during World War II, so there was a huge workforce that had moved here for opportunity to contribute to the war effort. And they were the first one, and they were predominantly African American, but also from Appalachia and some other places. But they were basically trapped here, and right as that opportunity was leaving, the city and the machine politicians were 100% behind this because it gave them billions of dollars to play with, embarked on this public housing program. And if you build new housing into a market that is in decline, you're going to get vacancy in the private sector. Then you're going to get blight. From vacancy comes blight. Then you get flight.
Right.
Disinvestment. Nobody wants to invest.
Right.
And the nature of the program made this much worse because they built these horrendous high-rise public housing projects.
That became nightmares.
Yeah, they became absolute nightmares. So they built 10,000 units of those. And then, and notably, in 1950, there was absolutely no talk of oh, we need to do this in Baltimore County. They only started doing that in the 60s after it was a total failure.
Right.
And they said, well, now we need to fix our failure by spreading it to Baltimore County.
Right.
Baltimore County said, no.
Right.
As any reasonable, objectively logical person would say, having witnessed what happened in Baltimore City. And by the way, the program was sold based on completely ridiculous false promises, that it would reduce crime, the housing would be beautiful and modern, it wouldn't cause taxes to go up. All these things were wrong. And there were people opposing it at the time who were overlooked and ignored. Who predicted exactly what would happen.
Yeah, even in the book Baltimore Unbound, he states that the taxes in the surrounding counties are going to have to go up so that they can lower the taxes within Baltimore City and bring them, make them more equitable between the different.
Well, and that happened. We're doing that right now. It's called the state government.
Right. But
I mean, Baltimore County pays 50% of its school roughly, and Baltimore City pays 18%. So I mean, we do subsidize because it's a poor jurisdiction, and there's a certain amount of that I mean, we have to.
Right, but the one thing that the author did not go into, and I have dated back to 15 years ago, that in the past 15 years, there's been a mass migration of wealth, not only out of the state, but particularly out of Baltimore County. And I think the number has, in the past 15 years, 70,000 people have left Baltimore County. There's been a huge influx of people from Baltimore City into Baltimore County, but the county's number of residents only went up 11,000.
Right.
So basically, the situation you have, if you look at the data, is people with money are leaving and going to either low tax or no tax states, and they're being backfilled by people that don't have money, which means Baltimore County is going to have to put more people on the dole. Taxes are going to have to go up to support that, but your tax base is starting to head in the same direction as Baltimore City's tax base. Nobody's talking about that.
Yeah. The big problem is that Baltimore City is almost a failed state, and anyone that can leave is leaving. The schools are really the core thing that drives a lot of people out of the city. I mean, we need to fix that and stop doing what clearly isn't working.
For those viewers that don't know, explain to them what they want to do to Baltimore County, meaning Lafferty that you're running against, and also Kevin Cabinets, and oh my God, Johnny Oleski, if he gets in, Baltimore County will
Right.
be the new Baltimore City.
Yeah, so the basic plan, it's a regionalized housing authority, and you know, unlike in 1950, at least, you know, the city politicians made that choice. They made the wrong choice to get into the public housing in such a big way. They're not asking us here in Baltimore County. They're just imposing it. And you know, the Cabinet settlement, which you know cost taxpayers $30 million and caused us to relocate 2,000 families, build 1,000 units of Section 8 housing. That's the first step, in the words of these advocates. But the goal is to really engage in what is the largest social engineering program probably in the history of the United States, some 40,000 people. I mean, they said in Baltimore Unbound, 11,346 families moved from Baltimore City to Baltimore County. And the people who will do that are not, they don't answer to any elected officials. They're completely unaccountable to democracy. They put themselves in this position. They got to deal with HUD for 20 years to manage the Section 8 voucher program. They call themselves a Baltimore Regional Housing Partnership. Baltimore County has no role in it. So they're clearly targeting Baltimore County. And they're the ones who are going to run this program.
Now, haven't they been targeting Baltimore County since it was, I think, since Dutch Ruppersberger?
Yeah, there was the original, that was, there was an experiment, the Moving to Opportunity.
Right, because I remember around Parkville Senior High School, we started hearing throughout the neighborhood that Baltimore County was buying houses, making them rental properties, and moving in Section 8ers. And if you look at that neighborhood now, like 20 years later, it's a lot different. The school's a lot different. I've got a friend that's trying to pull his kid out of Baltimore, Parkville Middle, because he said it's changed so much since we went there that.
I mean, yeah, the thing about the Moving to Opportunity program is they studied that. It was designed to be an experiment. It was set up as, with controls in several cities. And the first round, they could not find any benefits to the people who were being moved. And that's pretty remarkable. Now, they've subsequently gone back and looked at it again, and they found, yeah, there were benefits for kids aged 0 to 12 when they moved. But for kids 12 and older, it actually harmed them. Yeah, there was a higher rate of criminal behavior, and it didn't make any difference for the parents in terms of the income that they received. Being involved in this. So, I mean, the response then is, okay, well, we need to make it bigger. Every time one of these programs fails, the response is, well, we need more power. We need to spread it to Baltimore County. Which, the fundamental problem with all of these programs is it's run by, these really arrogant, elitist, kind of cobble, the people that are running the Baltimore Regional Housing Partnership, who are just hardcore left-wing ideologues.
And they probably don't live in the neighborhoods that are going to be affected.
Of course not. No. I mean, the Baltimore Regional Housing Partnership has more people based in D.C. on the board than it does in Baltimore County. So, but they're going around neighborhood by neighborhood and setting the price of a voucher. To create an economic incentive to move people to certain targeted areas. And I mean, the history of their track record, it's not going to work out well for anyone involved. And by the way, these people, Baltimore City politicians, have had a serious beef with these people as well, because there's a program called LIHTC and low-income housing tax credits. In 2011, the ACLU and these guys, tried to get the O'Malley administration to basically redirect low-income housing tax credits to Baltimore County. Every politician in Baltimore City came out against this because it's a finite pool of resources, and they recognize that if you build a project in Towson, that means you're not going to be able to build a project in Park Heights that, where you really need neighborhood investment, and you're taking that away from them. So this is the project here is driven not even by Baltimore City. It's not like there's an organic groundswell in Baltimore City. It's driven by this really kind of hardcore left-wing ideological bent that is very. People would believe that if they control everything, if they can go around and change where people live, that they'll produce a better outcome than a free society would.
Right. And I want to clear something up with our viewers right now, because I am a landlord, and one of the things that the Sun paper continuously says is that the neighborhoods such as Towson, what they would call high opportunity neighborhoods, that somehow Section 8 renters are shut out because landlords are not forced to participate in the Section 8 program. Well, as a landlord, I participated in the Section 8 program, and if you are a landlord, all you have to do is go over to the Drum Center in Baltimore County, say you want to participate, then they send an inspector out to your property and make sure that it passes their inspection, and then they put your name on a list, and they let people know that that's available for Section 8 rental.
I mean, it's a program that gives guaranteed federal money to landlords, and you have landlords that don't want to participate in it.
So landlords that want to participate in it can participate in it, and there are plenty of landlords in these neighborhoods that they call neighborhoods of opportunity that do in fact participate in these programs. Okay, so this whole thing that the Sun paper is saying that there's a lack of opportunity in these neighborhoods for Section 8 renters to get into it, it's a lie.
Well, the big lie is the whole premise of the Home Act is it's supposed to outlaw this thing that sounds very nasty called source of income discrimination.
Right.
And this is an invented term. Source of income, because this voucher is not income. It's a government program, and if a landlord chooses not to participate in that program, that's not discrimination.
Right.
And it's run by HUD, so the landlords have a lot of reason not to participate in that program because HUD mismanages it.
Right. Now, the reason I started renting to Section 8 with some of my rentals was that when the economy tanked, people in Section 8 actually looked like a better source of income than regular people. So I started renting Section 8, okay? And I did it for a while. It was kind of a mixed bag. But then the last family that I rented to, they literally destroyed one of my houses. It cost me $8,000 to fix up. In fact, maybe I'll insert some of the photographs so you can see what they did to my house. When they moved in, the house was beautiful. And the thing was is these people were nice. They were church-going. They were polite. But there was something in their psyche that they could not live in a house unless it was filthy to the point of being infested with rats and mice and roaches. I remember I came over one time, there's literally mice building a nest in the closet in the master bedroom, and I'm looking at them like, you can't just sit there and watch them and be amazed that they're building their home.
The joys of being a landlord.
Right, you need to knock it out. And you need to make sure that these rodents don't come in there. But I had an exterminator come in every month because of the rats, and I'd never had problems with rats before. I mean, they were just filthy.
The problem with the program is that the people who run it are ideologues, and they believe in a fundamental right to free government housing.
Right.
And if you can't get it in every neighborhood, well, that somehow is discrimination. But
and every
so they don't police it.
Every neighborhood has it. The Sun paper's lying when they say that Section 8 rentals aren't available in the neighborhoods they call high opportunity neighborhoods. They do exist, okay? Now, mark my words. If they pass the law saying that landlords cannot turn down people that are on Section 8 vouchers, what's going to happen is, because as a landlord, you have an apartment, you have a house, whatever, you get 6 to 8 people every time, okay? You go through, you look at credit, you look at past history, look at criminal records, all this, and then you make your choice. What's going to happen is a landlord is going to choose to rent to someone that's not on Section 8 because they're the best candidate. It could be for a variety of reasons. And then that's going to open the door for a lawsuit for someone that is on Section 8, dragging landlords into court, saying that you did not rent to me, you rented to them because I'm on Section 8.
Yeah. I mean, that's the way that's the mechanism by which the Home Act operates. Is it creates a new civil right for people receiving government assistance. So, vouchers. And not only can that person sue, but the ACLU can sue Baltimore County. Because now, if Baltimore County doesn't, if they were to cut funding, which is a democratic decision, or change zoning, well, that's discriminating against a class of people that are protected by civil rights laws, which is recipients of government assistance. I mean, this is crazy.
Right.
You know, there is no democratic decision that cannot be challenged under those grounds.
Well, for me, the question becomes, who gets to decide who you rent your house to or your apartment to? Do you, as the individual, have the right to decide who you're going to rent to, or can the government dictate to you who you're going to rent to?
Well, the way it's going to work is, if you take, for example, let's get Rogers Forge, which is a neighborhood in my district, and it's a row house neighborhood. There's a big complex, Rogers Forge Apartments, 508 units.
Right.
So as soon as the Home Act passes, what happens is the ACLU, Barb Samuels, and they come down to the Rogers Forge Apartments and say, okay, we have 100 units. We have 100 tenants for
Right.
And
if you don't take them, we're going to sue you.
If you don't take them, you're going to get sued.
Right.
And the landlord's going to have to take it. And by the way, they're also going to say, here's our lease terms. We're going to control how you manage the property.
Right.
What you can ask of your tenants.
Right.
Whether or not you have the right to evict people for noise complaints. Oh, that's discrimination.
Right.
Anything can be discrimination if it has some sort of separate impact on people who have vouchers. But everything has because it's a fundamentally different thing than income.
Right.
It's a government program.
Right.
So they control the lease terms. They control how you can evict people. So basically now the ACLU, Barb Samuels, Public Justice Center, the people that run this Baltimore Regional Housing Partnership, they run the Rogers Forge Apartments.
Right.
They control that, and they've turned it into a privately owned public housing project.
Right.
And these people have been doing this in Baltimore City now for decades.
Right.
And they do not know how to run properties. They don't do a good job.
Right.
I mean, that should be indisputable.
Right.
The idea that they'll do a better job if they can somehow do it in Baltimore County also is ridiculous. I mean, it's an absurd argument. But, so that's why they create this source of income fiction, and the thing that Baltimore County, which is an incredibly diverse county, is basically this like racist, exclusionary territory that nobody can enter if they're African. I mean, it's ridiculous.
It is ridiculous.
It's not accurate. It's not,
if you look at the stats,
it's insulting to everyone.
Yeah, the Sun paper just blatantly prints a falsehood. If you look at the stats, Baltimore County is not some sort of racist white.
I mean, it's a majority-minority public school system.
Right.
Today, and I don't know what the exact breakdown is, but anyway, bottom line is Baltimore City fails people of all races.
Right.
And
it's horrible.
The government that they have there works very well for the machine politicians in the one-party state. It doesn't work very well for the people. And the last thing you want to do is to recreate that formula in Baltimore County.
Well, the formula, in my opinion, that destroyed Baltimore City was outrageously high crime, a lower standard of living, and high taxes. And I think that's the recipe that they're putting together for Baltimore County.
Well, also, you had, 50,000 people that came up during the war, right after the war, looking for jobs.
Right.
They couldn't find any. So Baltimore City's solution was, okay, let's warehouse them in these high-rises.
Right.
I mean, and they actually, as that failed, they doubled down. And they ended up building not 10,000, but 18,000 of these units. And when the high-rises failed, they just spread it throughout the city. So that is a core part of this problem, is that, you created the welfare system as it was designed did not work. The Great Society did not work. This should not be something that is in question. But, the people of the ACLU, the RHP, they're ideologues, and they refuse to accept that. And so they have to come up with someone to blame.
Let's look at what's going on in Baltimore County right now. If you go to the Baltimore County website, they admit that crime is up, particularly violent crime. Okay.
Especially on the east side.
Right. Standard of living. A friend of mine lives on Taylor Avenue, right outside of the city line. It's where the flagpole is. And he says now, in the last few years, now there's people opening in open air shooting dope right at the flag.
Taylor Avenue.
Taylor, I mean, it's right over the city-county line, so it's in the county, but the city line's like maybe 2 blocks down. And so this culture, this drug culture, this dirt bike culture is starting to creep into the county. I myself have seen illegal dirt bikes here in Lansdowne, down by the high school. Saw it last summer. There's 4 of them running around there. My friend has seen it on Taylor Avenue, on the county side of the line. And then there's a cemetery on the other side of Harford Road. And I just happened to be down there one day.
I have to admit that I have an illegal electric vehicle that I drive around the neighborhoods myself.
Right.
Solar powered.
Right, but I'm talking about the illegal dirt bikes.
Yeah.
So you're starting to see them creep into Baltimore County. And he's got a great saying. He says, you know, it's just like having North Avenue right at your door now. And if that's the mentality of the people that are living in Baltimore County, they're leaving. They are not going to put up with that.
Yeah.
And if Oleski gets in, Johnny O gets in, we're done. Parkville is going to become the new pig town. Woodlawn's going to become Hoodlawn. It's going to become just like Baltimore City. And the taxes are going to go up, the crime's going to go up, and the quality of life is going to go down. So how do we stop that?
Well, the first thing to do is people have to, you know, if you shine a light on what these groups are doing, I think county voters will say no.
Right.
Yeah, there's a reason they're doing this in secret.
Right.
Right? It's because what they're trying to do is unpopular. It makes no, the arguments they make against us, they're economically illiterate, irrational. They wouldn't withstand any sort of public scrutiny. The real flaw with the Section 8 program is, I mean, there's no accountability, for the people.
Right.
It's not. If you wanted to create a program that actually helped working poor, it would look something like earned income tax credit, but paid monthly so that they could use it for rent. And that would take all of these central planners, it would take the Baltimore regional, it would put them all out of business. It would empower the people and not the politicians and bureaucrats.
Right.
And I've proposed that. I actually proposed that to Lafferty, and his response was, well, people would waste the money. Like, I mean, that's the sort of arrogance that you get. I mean, okay, I mean, certainly some people would waste the money.
Right.
I mean, that goes without saying. It's a large group of people.
Right.
Even if, most of them are good, hardworking people, there's always going to be, that set that wastes the money. But why do you start with the assumption that they're all, not capable of blowing their rent money that's being given to them by the government? You start with that assumption, and I mean that's
Democrats like that like to treat people like children.
It's designed to encourage dependency.
Exactly.
That's the way the program is designed to encourage dependency, and then you have people that just for whatever reason can't take care of themselves. Well, there's a solution for that also, and there's all the social workers you mentioned. They want to help people, organizations. There are plenty of them out there. You give grants and let them administer the money on behalf of those people. And whether they need to be in a group home to deal with addiction or whatever the problem is, it's not going to be addressed by a government program, especially not by a government program that just says, okay, well, let me move you to a nice house in the suburbs.
Let me give you another personal, something that I've experienced on a personal level. Where I live, 3 doors down, when I bought my house, where I'm currently at, I don't know, 15, 18 years ago, whatever it was, little old lady, probably been there since before World War II, around World War II. Well, she gets old, she either went into a nursing home or she passed away. Somebody bought the house, turned it into a rental, moves in a Section 8 renter. Now, 2 doors down from me, a black family had moved in. The guy works for the city, not sure what the wife does, but the wife, I think, is from Jamaica. Well, these Section 8 renters move in. They claim that they're from 2 blocks off North Avenue around Bel Air Road, certainly a bad neighborhood. Okay, move into a pretty decent county neighborhood. Within 10 days, the Section 8 renters get in a fight with the neighbors next to them, 2 black families, right? And lo and behold, here was this house where this little old lady lived that we never had a problem. She kept it up, and within a week of these people being there, a little more than a week, 8 cop cars around, one neighbor screaming at the other, and there was another situation where there was like a side road, and somebody came to pick up the girl that lived in the Section 8 house, and he's blocking the road, wouldn't let me through, and I'm thinking that there's something wrong. There's nothing wrong, but it's like the whole mentality of not being considerate about other people, just pulling into a parking spot so traffic can flow, getting in fights, and the guy told the other family, look, I'm from North Avenue. I'm going to bring all my boys up here, you know, if you keep this beef going with me. And then their electricity's been turned off, and then I guess they're going back to their old neighborhood because they only come up at about midnight and they leave at 6 in the morning. They just sleep there.
Yeah.
But so here, I mean, I'm literally living with this nightmare that, according to the Baltimore Sun, is going to be a big rainbow of happiness.
Yeah.
All of our problems, real and imagined, are going to be solved with Section 8 people being bombarded in the Baltimore County.
Well, you can't. I mean, yeah, and here's the thing. It's like, it's a large group of people, and, you know, the majority can be, you know, good, hardworking people. But what do you, I mean, it's 10,000 people in any population.
Right.
There's going to be a portion of problems. People are criminals. People are bad neighbors.
Right.
So what do you do about that?
Right.
And
so literally, I'm living what they're advocating. 3 doors down from me is now a Section 8 renter. Within 10 days, we got cops in the neighborhood where there were never cops before. We got neighbors fighting neighbors.
Yeah, they have a right to free housing.
Right.
And that's paramount.
Right.
That's the mentality of the people running this program.
And I say to myself,
there's no concern about the neighborhoods they're targeting.
I went to college. I've got a good job. I've paid my own way, and I found a decent neighborhood that I wanted to live in. Then these people that haven't worked as hard as me have the exact same right to the same material outcome that I've provided for myself. That seems awfully unfair.
Well, that's the, you know, it's fair if you come at it from a very left-wing, almost Marxist sort of perspective, where everybody gets, you know, the same
misery.
Yeah, and that's what happens when you have ideologues run a program like this.
Right.
I mean, there are two, you know, there's America where, you know, you spend more money or you earn more money and you get nicer things, and that's not the way these programs work. They aren't designed to encourage that aspect of America. You know, if they were, you know, you would go down and you would take, you know, the working poor, and look, I mean, there's a legacy of discrimination and you know, segregation, and that has a bearing on everything today. But you're not going to fix it by doing more of the same. You're going to fix it by empowering people and getting people a good education.
Right.
And these are the things that, you know, have not been done in Baltimore for the last 70 years.
Right. Well, let me ask you this: what do you do about the problems in Baltimore City, where you do have this hyper concentration of black poverty?
Well, I mean, you know, to some extent, it is going to, you know, dissipate over time, and as long as you don't continue to encourage segregation. I mean, to some extent, you know, what we really
Well, can I jump in for a second? Because I want to make something clear. A lot of people will say, well, it's a hyper-concentration of black poverty, okay? I don't see it in racial terms. I see it in economic terms. I don't see racism. I see a society that has economic tiers, okay? And there's no political or economic system out there that guarantees a classless society. Now, communism will say that, but what in reality happens, you have a two-tiered society.
Right.
Those in political power that basically leech off the other class of people. And so in the way that I look at the problems in Baltimore City, it's not so much about race, it's about class. And I think that in my mind's eye, if you want to fix the problem in Baltimore City, stop voting Democrat, man. I mean, they've been in power for more than 50 years.
Yeah.
They have failed miserably. Vote Green Party, Libertarian, Republican. Just get rid of all the Democrats.
Yeah. Well, and the engine of segregation today is the public school system. And the way it is set up with, you know, you have a high school, you have a middle school, and they have their turf, right? It's like, and if you're in that turf, that's your school.
Right.
And now there's some choice in Baltimore City, but we're the second worst state in the country for charter schools. So if you take that Section 8 map that they have and go into all the neighborhoods that have high concentrations of poverty and say, you know what, we have something better for you. If you live in this area, we're going to give you real choice.
Right.
You know, and it's such a wide part of the city that, you know, you'd be able to create a lot of institutions.
Vouchers.
Yeah, effectively vouchers. I mean, the problem with that is that they won't work at, you know, a lot of the private schools because the private schools don't want to take state, you know, they don't want the state bureaucrats telling them what to do.
Right.
Basically recreating the same. So, I think it's more like charter schools, you know, where you're talking about existing institutions creating independent schools that operate independently of North Avenue or Greenwood.
Right.
So we have this problem in Baltimore County as well.
Right.
And are able to, you know, come up with things that parents, and schools that parents actually believe in. Yeah, and if you do that, and you have that benefit of choice in those neighborhoods, you'll stop forcing, you know, everyone who can afford to flee of all races. You know, this isn't, it's economic.
Right.
Forcing them out of that neighborhood, and you'll encourage a more developed, balanced development pattern, effectively.
Right.
And strangely, you know, the BRHP people, the ACLU, you know, although they're suburban social re-engineers during the day, they're anti-gentrification activists at night.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's like, you know, you're damned if you do, damned if you don't. You want to invest in Baltimore City.
Right.
And, you know, they'll complain about that as well. You know, the
Right.
common denominator of all their solutions is them in control of everything.
Right.
So.
Right. In control of people's money that live in the surrounding counties.
Yep.
So.
Yeah.
Okay, so if you're elected delegate, okay, if you win in the general election, what are you going to do to stop this once you get down to Annapolis?
Yeah, so I've been trying to shine a light on this. You know, I've done thousands of Freedom of Information Act requests, and I've been somewhat successful as a private citizen.
Can I stop you there? Tell our viewers about the last letter you just got, because I saw the video on Facebook. Tell them what you got, because when I was laughing.
Right. So, yeah, the Kaminetz litigation was all done entirely in secret. You know, we were never even shown what we were accused of. And so I started filing Freedom of Information Act requests 13 months ago. HUD finally responded, and they still haven't provided a single page of documents. I've gotten them from other channels. But, and they said, well, we're not going to provide a lot of these documents because the ACLU has objected to making this information public. And one of they've cited Exemption 7E, which is for law enforcement entities. You know, so that we're not able to interfere with their law enforcement entity.
And these are the people that want to come into Baltimore County and force Section 8 housing in your neighborhood.
Yeah.
Listen to the lie. ACLU is suddenly a law enforcement agency.
I mean,
that's why they can't
thought they
give you
were for
information.
due process and open transparency in government. I mean, I think they were involved in the original Freedom of Information Act bill.
Right.
But, you know, in this situation, well, this they're just going to try to hide from everyone and do behind the scenes. And I'll tell you, there's a reason. There are actually a lot of reasons they're doing this in secret.
Yeah.
None of them good.
Yeah.
So, you know, if that information, so number one is I would, you know, as delegate, I would shine a light on this, force them to produce this information.
Now, could you force them through introducing a bill in Annapolis that particular agency is governed by the Freedom of Information Act? Or does that have to be done on the federal level?
That would have to be done on the federal level with regard to the HUD litigation that they're going after. But there are various. You can force them as an operator in Maryland. Their ongoing operations.
Right.
You know, in the administration of this program, you can absolutely force them to become subject to state PIA.
It's amazing that they have tax dollars. They're using our
and I'd go further than that. I'd change their governance mechanism and you know,
And you could do that through legislation at
through
the
state
level.
legislation. Yes, you could.
Okay.
Yes. They would fight it, as they fight everything. They play dirty.
Right.
They use all sorts of litigation.
Right.
But ultimately, you have a lot of power as a legislature to
Right.
To enforce compliance on entities that are operating, and administering $50 million
Right.
within your border.
Right.
So
Right.
that would be one thing. I mean, I would also push. This is a much more difficult challenge, but I'd push to do an experiment here to take the Section 8 program and migrate it away from this voucher system towards something that's similar to the Earned Income Tax Credit.
Right.
Like I've proposed. Really empower the people. And take the central planners out of the mix. I mean, Baltimore has been used as basically a proving ground for HUD's, for HUD's projects.
Right.
People in D.C., they love to visit their projects,
Right.
45 minutes away in Baltimore,
Right.
and it's been to great detriment to the city.
Right.
The public housing experiment was a disaster. We're now replacing that with this program targeting Baltimore County. That's also not going to end well.
Right.
So let's do something radically different. Something that, what we've been doing has not worked.
Right.
So let's do something radically different.
Right.
And that would be empowering the people versus the central planners.
Yeah, I completely agree with you.
And broadening the program. The idea that, you're providing one family $2,700 a month, which is an incredible amount of money, to rent a house.
Where's my check?
Towson. Why? It's too much for that one family, and not enough. Yet there's a waiting list of 20,000 people or something to get. Right. And there's clearly a lot of need with the working poor and being able to afford quality housing.
Right.
So.
Right.
So I would spread the benefits more broadly, and just take the idea that the government has to provide you a free house out of the equation.
Right.
So.
Right. Let's touch on something that is just outside of this conversation. I basically grew up in Baltimore County, and when I was growing up, the idea that there would be a vacant house in where I lived, unheard of, unthought of. Now, I'd say in the last 15 years, I go out for walks, I can find a vacant property in almost every other block now.
Yeah.
I see some that are boarded up now. In the particular block that I've lived in, like I said, I think I've been there for about 17 years now. When I moved in, there was one house in foreclosure. In the past 17 years, as soon as that house goes through the process of getting a new owner, the next one goes into foreclosure. There seems to be in Baltimore County almost like an economic quicksand, and that things that are taking place in Baltimore County were unheard of just 15 years ago, and it's looking, like I said, it's starting to feel like and look like Baltimore City.
Right. One thing that has not helped is to make it extremely time-consuming to foreclose on properties.
Right.
That creates vacancy,
Right.
blight. And basically you have your owners that took on too much debt,
Right.
and they walk away, and then the property sits there for 9 months while the bank or whoever has the debt is trying to foreclose on it.
Right.
And during that 9 months, all sorts of things happen.
Mm-hmm.
And if you get the pipe stripped out, you get something like that happens. Now it costs too much money to renovate.
Right.
So that's how you end up with blight. Is
Right.
from situations like that. I agree. There really
From the
shouldn't be blight in Baltimore County. Most of the neighborhoods have
From the city
strong
line
dynamics.
inside the Beltway, okay?
Yeah.
That's where I live. That's where I go for my walks
Right.
at night.
That's
And I'm
where we
telling
are.
you, it's starting to look like and feel like Baltimore City. And it's making a lot of people say, I'm leaving.
Yeah.
And when you look at the stats for the last 15 years, it's not encouraging.
Right.
And unless we get somebody like you in there that has vision, knowledge, and the fight to stop all this, we're not going to be good. If Lafferty gets in again,
Yeah.
and
The
and
Home Act.
Eric Bromwell got to go.
Yeah.
I mean, I worked in Annapolis. His father's office was right across the hall from me.
Right.
I mean, I would sit at my desk, and I could see straight through his 2 doors, and he'd be at his desk, and I'd be, hey, how you doing? You know?
I mean, yeah, you should always be suspicious of politicians that inherit their office from their father.
Right.
I think. Yeah, I mean, there's also basic code enforcement stuff that the county needs to do.
Right.
And beyond that, I think the county does a pretty good job. I mean, you get these situations where the ownership and they're in foreclosure where there's really nothing they can do.
Right.
You know, that is.
I think the foreclosure problem isn't so much a local government problem. I think
that's a state issue. Yeah.
Well, there's something going on in the economy. You know, back in the day, you know, you'd get your job down at Bethlehem Steel, and you'd be there for your whole life. You could take out a 30-year mortgage, you could pay it off. But the way that the job market is, people switch jobs quite a lot, and the really good-paying jobs aren't out there anymore. But we're still in this mentality of a 30-year mortgage on a house.
Yeah, right.
So I think that has something to do with it. But
there are plenty of good-paying jobs in construction, I'll tell you that.
Yeah, but the problem is becoming very evident in Baltimore County. Okay, and if you've got vacant houses and houses that are beginning to get boarded up, you know, that also is a detriment to the county's tax base.
Yeah. No, I mean, we've had that. We've had them in East Towson where, you know, it's a weird ownership situation. You can't track down, you don't know who owns it. Maybe the person died. It's going through the state. I mean, yeah, that, in terms of the more, the structural issues, in terms of like the East Side, I guess, there's structural issues in the economy where it's not, it's not as conducive to, and that's contributing to certainly some of the problems.
Right. So tell our viewers how your campaign's been going.
Oh, yeah. So knocked on 2,500 doors. We're trying to get the word out, and not just on, there are a lot of local issues where, the current representative, he's serving the machine. He's voting 99.5% of the time with Bush, and 99.5% of that agenda isn't in the interest of our residents. There are a lot of things that are. Bush doesn't care about widening York Road, which is a major bottleneck in our district. So that's focusing on positive improvements other than trying to expose this what really should be a national scandal the way this has been put in place here. Very anti-democratic, elitist. But public schools auditing the county schools. We have a new Towson High that's in planning. So there are a lot of issues, and we're in the process of just trying to get them out to the public. So there's door knocking and direct mail. And I'm new to politics, so I'm like, unfortunately, I'm learning all this stuff on the fly. But I think it's going well. We have a debate coming up on the 28th.
Okay, where's the debate at? What
Towson
time?
University, 6 p.m. at the Johnny Unitas Stadium. I forget which room it is, but it's all over the internet. It's on my site.
Is it?
On Facebook.
Well, maybe we'll come out and cover it.
Yep.
And it's just going to be you and Lafferty?
There for an hour, and then it's also Chris West and Robbie Leonard for the Senate seat for an hour.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, thanks for coming out.
Yeah,
and
thank you.
Don't be a stranger, and good luck in the election.
I'll be back.
And we'll end it there. So thank you for tuning in to TV Free Baltimore's Maryland Politics, and we'll see you next time.
You're watching Maryland Politics here on TV Free Baltimore.
Why do so many fellow Democrats refuse to support Ben Jealous? Because Jealous is too extreme for Maryland.
Go ahead, call me a socialist.
Jealous would raise your taxes, and his radical, irresponsible proposals would destroy our economy. A nonpartisan analysis says his health care plan alone could cost an extra $2,800 from every man, woman, and child.
Go ahead, call me a socialist.
Maryland can't afford Ben Jealous as governor.
You wouldn't vote for Ben Jealous, right? So why vote for Johnny O? Like Jealous, Johnny's a big spending taxer. He supported every O'Malley budget and voted to increase taxes and spending 56 times, even the rain tax. Johnny O and Ben Jealous, a team Baltimore County can't afford.
I'm Al Redmer. As county executive, I'll work with Governor Hogan to demand accountability in our schools, encourage job creation, and make Baltimore County safer and more affordable.
What is capitalism? It's all about supply and demand, freedom, choice, and incentive. So, supply and demand is how capitalism sets prices. If you are selling something, you can charge any price you like for it. But if you're buying something, you can pay what you like for it too. So the actual price is what the seller and the buyer both agree on. What that normally means is that rare things are worth a lot of money. Lots of places sell apples. If someone tries to make me pay a $5 for an apple, I'll just go somewhere else. Apple computers, though, are expensive. I can't buy them cheaper, so it's a choice of paying what the seller wants or just not having one. The same is true of skills. If I can do something nobody else can, I can charge a lot for my time. If anyone can do my job, it's harder to get paid a lot. At the heart of capitalism, then, is freedom. Nobody can tell you what to do to earn money, nor how to spend it. It's entirely up to you. This creates a vast range of choice. You create your own path. By choosing education and training, you might be able to get a better paid job in the future. Or you can start work in whichever sector you want to. Fans of capitalism say it works because of incentives. You want more money? So you'll be more inventive, either to make something new and desirable, or to cut the costs on existing products, making them cheaper. So, both of these things are good for everybody else. You are rewarded with more profit, and both you and the consumer are better.
4 years ago, people were fleeing Maryland. 43 tax hikes, even taxing the rain. 100,000 jobs lost. So we elected Larry Hogan. $1.2 billion in tax, toll, and fee relief. Highest ever funding for schools. Healthiest bay in a generation. Maryland's back. When we needed a leader, Hogan was there. And when he needed us, we returned the favor. Larry Hogan, changing Maryland.
When you see around the globe the maldistribution of wealth, the desperate plight of millions of people in underdeveloped countries, when you see so few haves and so many have-nots, when you see the greed and the concentration of power within, did you ever have a moment of doubt about capitalism and whether greed's a good idea to run on?
Well, first of all, tell me, is there some society you know that doesn't run on greed? You think Russia doesn't run on greed? You think China doesn't run on greed? What is greed? Of course, none of us are greedy. It's only the other fellow who's greedy. The world runs on individuals pursuing their separate interests. The great achievements of civilization have not come from government bureaus. Einstein didn't construct his theory under order from a bureaucrat. Henry Ford didn't revolutionize the automobile industry that way. In the only cases in which the masses have escaped from the kind of grinding poverty you're talking about, the only cases in recorded history or where they have had capitalism and largely free trade. If you want to know where the masses are worst off, it's exactly in the kinds of societies that depart from that. So that the record of history is absolutely crystal clear that there is no alternative way so far discovered of improving the lot of the ordinary people that can hold a candle to the productive activities that are unleashed by a free enterprise system.
But it seems to reward not virtue as much as ability to manipulate the system.
And what does reward virtue? You think the communist commissar rewards virtue? You think a Hitler rewards virtue? You think, excuse me, if you'll pardon me, do you think American presidents reward virtue? Do they choose their appointees on the basis of the virtue of the people appointed or on the basis of their political clout? Is it really true that political self-interest is nobler somehow than economic self-interest? You know, I think you're taking a lot of things for granted. And just tell me where in the world you find these angels who are going to organize society for us. Well, I don't even trust you to do that.
Maryland Reporter is a news website about state government and politics. That's what we do. We don't do sports, we don't do entertainment. We do some local news as it impacts politics and state government. From the very start, November 2nd, 2009, we do a daily state roundup from now 50 different websites, the Baltimore Sun, the Washington Post, the Hagerstown Herald-Mail, other newspapers around the state, broadcast outlets, smaller newspapers, some blogs, and we put it together, and this is the thing that people find most valuable. But we also do original stories that focus on accountability of state government, transparency, how tax dollars are raised and spent. We do a daily email newsletter that people can go on the site and sign up for. It takes about 10 seconds. That's going out to 8,600 subscribers every weekday. And so, you know, our niche, to repeat again, is really state government and politics.
You're watching Maryland Politics here on TV Free Baltimore.
Hello, this is Paul Stefan, and welcome to another edition of Maryland Politics. And tonight we'll be talking to a candidate for the 7th District House of Delegates seat for the Republican Party, and that's Lauren Arikan. Welcome, Lauren.
Thank you so much.
Nice to have you here.
Thanks.
Now, since some people watching are people from all over, we want to know a little idea about your district. What does that encompass geographically, and what does it encompass demographically?
Right. So my district goes from the Joppa Middle River area on the water, and then sort of diagonally across the Baltimore-Harford County line, 50-50 about, all the way over, like across 83 to the Maryland line area. I've Moncton and Parkton and Whitehall, Jarrettsville, where I live, all the way down to the more urban setting of Middle River and Joppa.
Yeah, okay.
It's quite large. and from a demographic standpoint, you know, our district is 79% Republican.
Oh, okay.
It's what we would like to call a gerrymandered district.
Aren't they all?
Yeah, yeah. And it was done, I mean, you know, quite interestingly, I think to protect the Senate seats in 8 and 42.
Okay.
And effectively, until this year, I think.
So you did answer that question for me, which I was going to say, are you a resident of your district?
Yes, yeah. I live in Jarrettsville. I haven't always lived there. I actually grew up in Ellicott City, not far away from here. But we bought a farm. We looked for almost 2 years to find a small farm in Maryland. It can be hard to find. We finally found it. And It's beautiful.
But you're not from farm stock, are you?
I'm not. No, I grew up in suburbs, and I
Okay.
think you know, my first home with my oldest was in Perry Hall, Parkville area.
Mm-hmm.
A townhome, and I wouldn't call it suburban completely. It was moving towards urban, and it just wasn't for me. It wasn't for me. My husband grew up in a city of 1 million people, so he wanted to live in a big city, and I said no way, not this big city, babe. But so we finally, after giving it a shot in the suburbs, we committed to farm life.
Yes, there
and
you go.
it's wonderful.
Now, tell me, you've never run for office before, have you?
No, I haven't. It's my first time.
Okay.
This is my
What
first time.
compelled you to run this year?
I thought the district could use something fresh. You know, they had been, the people that had been representing it had been there for a while. And I think Annapolis in general could use a bit of fresh blood, some young blood. It's gotten a little stuffy down there, I think. So the opportunity presented itself. It was actually not planned at all by me. We ended up finding a farm in District 7. But even if I had purchased a farm in Reisterstown, where Republicans don't tend to win, I probably would have put my name on the ballot, because I like for the Republicans to see that there's somebody out there, even if there's a slim chance of winning, they deserve to have somebody's name on the ballot. So I think no matter where I had landed, I would have put my name on the ballot.
Okay. 'Cause I was going to say, though, you brought that up, and I'll bring it, since you brought it up, I'll go with it, this thing about the young blood.
Yeah.
And I'll get a little expansive, but we'll start with this question. What do you think of term limits?
I actually don't like them.
You don't?
No, I don't. I know it's an unusual position to take, but here's why. So I come into politics from the citizen lobbying side.
Right.
So I've spent the last several years lobbying for parental rights, medical autonomy in Annapolis. And one of the things you learn on the lobbying side is that the freshmen are super sweet and friendly and more eager to please than the ones that have been there a long time.
Okay.
So when I think of term limits, I think that's a lobbyist paradise. So, you know, and I think our most effective legislators on the conservative side are the ones that have been there a long time. They've built the relationships necessary to get things done, especially in a minority party situation, in truly a one-party rule situation. Term limits won't benefit us the way that we think. You know, Republicans often say, I wish there was term limits in Maryland. That way Miller and Bush wouldn't be there forever.
Right.
And I say, first of all, careful what you wish for. And that doesn't benefit us, though, as Republicans, if there are term limits. Our most impactful legislators would be gone. So that's why I don't actually support term limits.
Which is, like I said, there's that dichotomy there, and you say, I don't favor term limits, but we need fresh blood in Annapolis.
Yeah, so we need people like me to be willing to put ourselves out there. And I think the people offer term limits. I mean, if the people want term limits, they should stop voting for the same people every 4 years. They can institute those all on their own. That's why we have elections.
Right. So, all right. Now tell me, you know, based on the background, because you touched a little bit, you talked about your lobbying. What do you feel qualifies you to be an effective legislator? Excuse me.
Yeah, I don't know. I think mostly my experience reading legislation, helping to write it. It's pretty rare in Annapolis, actually, as a freshman coming in, sort of already knowing the nuances of the way bills are structured, how they can be easily manipulated, and how just a semicolon or a comma can change an entire bill's meaning and ultimately what the impact it'll have on the community. So that's probably one of my biggest characteristics that'll help me down there. I'm also extremely good at communicating with the other side.
Okay.
I grew up in Howard County. It was a very mixed community. We had a lot of Democrats as well. So I grew up knowing and learning how to speak to people that didn't always agree with me. And I think that's a skill that we definitely need, especially as conservatives in Maryland.
Well, I was going to say, when you talked about some of your background, you talked about people, you know, you read legislation, and I read that about you too, to say, oh, I like sort of how the process works. You know, that you're kind of a I don't know, political junkie, we'll say.
Yeah, I have been known to watch the testimonies even when I don't have a bill that I'm going down to testify against. I like it. I like reading the bills. I like that part of it.
My experience to say, and maybe you would, so you talk about the people just coming in, but I'm saying many legislators and many people in Congress, the members, do not read bills or read them thoroughly. They have aides to read them for them, give them talking points, or here's the highlights, here's maybe even 2 or 3 sentences, this is what you have to vote for, this is why you have to vote for it, or why you have to vote against it, because they are inundated with so many bills to say they couldn't possibly read every comma and every period in a piece of legislation.
Yeah, that's absolutely right, and I don't doubt that I'll, you know, even on the lobbying side of things, I personally would read only the bills submitted to the House Health Committees and the Judiciary Committees. Now, I read every one of them.
Oh, okay.
It doesn't mean I remember them all, but
No,
I would
still, I understand.
It was hours and hours of reading each year, but I had to make sure there was not going to be any bills that slipped through the cracks, and that can happen in Maryland. But I had other people on our team in our PAC that would read the Senate side, or would read the other, you know, Ways and Means sometimes would have a bill that I thought could infringe a little bit. So it wasn't all on me, even on the lobbying side. It's just too much man hours. And I know once I get down there, I'll have to be judicious with how I spend my time. The committee that I'm on will be the one I'm mainly focused on.
Right.
And then I'll have to lean heavily on my aide. But luckily, I've convinced a close friend of mine to come down with me.
Okay.
And so I think she'll be a stellar addition.
Well, good. I think when you're talking about the term limit issue, another thing that people forget is the people in our legislature, and more so in Congress, the people who've been there the longest, seniority gets you better committees, seniority gets you chairmanships of committees.
Absolutely.
And if everybody's all rookies, that really throws the system off.
Yeah, it does. And that part of it might be interesting.
Yeah.
Although I think some of the, Republicans we don't control any committees. We don't even have a vice chair of any committee.
Yeah.
But I do think some of the ones that have been there longer, some of them do a great job, and some of them do just a truly terrible job. It's really hit or miss.
Okay.
It really is. But yeah, some fresh blood would be so nice down there, don't you think?
Yeah, sure. Especially if it's you.
I love it.
I think that one strength you have is you're not just somebody coming off the street, a mom with 3 kids who lives on a farm and raises goats. You're
Right.
somebody who has been down there. You've
Yeah.
seen how it works
Yeah.
as a lobbyist. And you've also, to your credit, I think the strength you can bring, maybe you can speak to this, how being a community activist and community service, how that will do you in good stead in Annapolis.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I spend a lot of my time trying to build a community. You know, my main focus is obviously the family. I think that that a good society really comes out of a strong family. That's really the central mantra of my life: protect the family. Because when you have a good family structure, you can really build a beautiful community out around that. So yeah, my advocacy for parental rights, medical autonomy, but also for supporting women in their childbearing years through my Birth Circle of Baltimore. It's gonna be good to see that fresh voice down there chiming in on bills, you know, when it can be helpful.
Or even relief, where I saw that you were a chair or something of raising money for the victims at the Granite Company.
I was, yeah. That company is owned by friends of ours, very good friends of ours. And that was just such a disgraceful, I mean, I can't even, it was so sad, but we did a good job. We raised, gosh, I don't know what the final number was, because we just started issuing the checks once we started getting money in, but over $10,000, I think, for this, this community. And it was a sad day, though.
True.
Yeah.
Now, also, because of the type of business you and your husband have with accounting and also, I think, financial management or investments, that how do you think that will help Annapolis with you with fiscal issues?
Yeah, my husband and I care a lot about fiscal responsibility. Yeah.
Okay.
We like to see a balanced budget. We don't think that's too much to ask. That's why we're pretty pleased with Hogan. He's done a nice job with the budgets. That was refreshing for Maryland to have some balanced budgets and some surplus. So I'll certainly be a big proponent of balanced budget and keeping taxes low. Our accounting business primarily deals with small businesses.
Oh, okay.
That's what we mainly focus on. And so we every day see the impacts of regulations, not just in this state, but we have clients out of this state all the way to California. So we can get a taste of what the differences are, you know, where we can make improvements in Maryland to help bolster small businesses so that we don't lose them all.
Right. So you're at least somebody who'll be able to look at the balanced, so-called balanced budget in Maryland and know what you're looking at.
It will help. And if I don't, I can phone home.
There you go.
Snap a photo, send it home. What is going on here, dear?
So there you go.
Yeah.
You have an aide there.
Yeah. He's been a wonderful aide. That sweet man. He's a saint.
For financial things. That's good. So it's again showing how you might be prepared.
Yeah.
Now I know an issue for you, and you did allude to it earlier, was the whole idea of gerrymandering districts and redistricting.
Yes.
And that is an issue for you. Why don't you speak a little bit about your
It's huge
feelings.
for us. Yeah, I'm very, very disappointed in how the other party, we shall say, has gotten away with the severe gerrymandering in this state. And it's done a number for us. Most of Maryland is purple. It's moderate. It's not far right or far left. When you gerrymander, you make each district so that only the most extreme person in each party can make it through their party's primary. Because those tend to be the people that vote in primaries. And the gerrymander that's been done is just really exemplified that. And we can see that in Ben Jealous as the candidate for governor. He's such an extreme left. And I think a lot of my even friends who are Democrats are thinking, that's not my guy. I mean, he doesn't represent me. But they also didn't vote in the primaries. So this is what you get when there's these extremes happening. So I'd like to see a beautiful map redrawn that makes sense, you know, that doesn't have a broken pterodactyl in the middle of it for congressional districts. I mean, CD2 is a scary thing. I mean,
mine
it's really
is too,
bad.
which is 3. You know.
Yeah. Oh, I was in 3 for many years. Yeah. I'm very pleased to be in 1 now. Actually, very pleased to be in Andy Harris's district finally.
Okay.
He'll at least call me back if I have an issue, so that's nice.
Well, that's good.
Yeah.
But I can see. Yeah, we need to do that. In fact, one of the things we've had another guest in here talked about the idea. I think it's sort of like they call micro districts or something. Like break them up. Like if you have 7 ABC, and have somebody who lives in that. If you have 3 people in your district, you have 1 person from A, 1 person from B, 1 person, and that they represent their constituency.
Absolutely. I love that.
You agree with that?
Yeah, I actually was at a fundraiser last night, and the guy in charge of planning, I saw him and I pulled him aside. I said, hey, I've got some great ideas. He's like, yeah, you and everyone else. And I said, no, really, here's my great idea. You've probably heard it before. I want to see 7A, B, and C.
Yeah, there you go.
I'm happy to take the rural side of it. I'm happy to take Middle River side of it if that's where you need me to be. But it's very hard as a legislator to say the people in Middle River need the same things as the people in Moncton and Parkton and Whitehall and Jarrettsville. It's so geographically different. It's so, you know, cost of living is different. It's so much more urban on the water side, and they have the water to deal with. Whereas the people out in the rural areas, they're not concerned with issues relating to the bay nearly as much. So, yeah, I would love to see an A, B, and C, and 7, especially because it's just so massive.
There you go.
In size, yeah.
I mean, in certain districts like yours, it's a glaring example.
It's so obvious, yeah.
I mean, probably somewhere, I don't know what the district numbers are. I would think of something like Frederick, where the way that grew, there are people who live in Frederick and right around the city.
Right.
They have their issues. And again, there are the farmers, the other rural, still part of Frederick County, that will not have the same issues.
Yeah, absolutely. It's totally different. It's really very, very different. So I would totally agree with you. A, B, and C, I'm behind it 100%.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, in this most recent primary, there were a lot of people running for the Republican seats.
Yeah.
3 people, only 3 people could get in.
That's right.
And you finished 3rd. You made it.
Yeah.
And so good to you.
Yeah.
And it looked like on the Democratic side, only 2 people ran. And
Right.
they both got in.
Yeah.
Obviously. And
Yeah.
I thought it was interesting. Of the 5 candidates who are left, 3 of them are women.
Yeah. Yeah, you're right.
Of the major parties. There's also a Green Party candidate.
Yeah, there's a Green Party candidate, and then Gordon Kerner and Allison Berkowitz is
That's right.
is the
And then it's you and Kathy.
Kathy and I and Rick and Pilaria. Yeah.
That's what I'm saying. So, and those two are incumbents, aren't they?
They are. Yeah, Rick and Kathy are incumbents. Yeah. Yeah. I think it's hard to find in a district that's so conservative to find enough Democrats that are willing to put the time and energy into a campaign. It's hard. So that's probably why they ended up with just the two.
Yeah, and I said also with that, I guess I'm trying to get to is your chances of being the third person. Now, you've been endorsed by Governor Hogan.
Yes.
You've been endorsed by Pat McDonough.
I have, yes.
And hopefully that's on your campaign signage, I hope. Or
yeah.
campaign literature.
You can see it, yeah. People in my district love him. They really do.
And the fact that, maybe he'll even, because he has a show here, that he may even talk about you on his show.
I hope he'll have me
between now
on
and
one
November.
day. Yeah.
We could even have you on. That would be great. We'll have you back in here.
Yeah, why not?
With Pat. So I would think, based upon that and the voters at 79%, do you feel, even though you're an unknown quantity, in a sense, before this last campaign, that you have a good chance to be number 3?
Yeah.
And sweep the district.
Yeah, we're very confident. We're very, very confident. The Democrats don't really have the numbers, and the party has kind of abandoned the district. They knew when they drew the district that they were not going to be aggressively pushing candidates out there. It's a waste of their time and money, so.
Right. So, I mean, with that then, so I'm going to wish you a lot of good luck with that. And another thing I forgot this quote that I thought was interesting that you said. You said, you were political since birth.
Isn't everybody, but we don't all admit it.
Okay.
Yeah, I was political.
So you were
since
interested
birth.
in politics and things even as a child, I guess.
Yeah, I can still remember myself before the Iraq War when things were just starting to gear up. Hearing some of my liberal friends complaining about how we were going to go to another war, over oil. And then I just did some research and thought, wow, that guy's a monster. So is that who we're defending?
At a very young age, see, you got to that. Now, I want to get into a little bit about some of the issues.
Yeah.
We talked about redistricting already. Let's see, bring up another one. How about taxes? What are your positions there?
I believe taxation is theft.
Okay, it's theft.
It is, yeah, that's how I feel. It's a necessary evil. We live in a world full of taxes. We have to accept that. Obviously, our bread and butter is taxes, so I know that we have to have it. Although my husband and I were quite thrilled when they were going to do the taxes on a postcard. Oh. We thought, that's great. The personals are... people deserve to be able to file their taxes, their personal returns on a postcard. Yeah, that would be awesome. Even though it might cut into our bottom line a bit. But yeah, limiting taxes, especially for businesses, it's so oppressive. Businesses leave. As we've seen with Baltimore, if you don't offer tax incentives, people will leave and the jobs will leave. But the people can't be then transferred out to new jobs. We have to bring the jobs to them. So there's so much room for improvement in Baltimore, and if we can get enough votes, in our party to sort of really get a say down in Annapolis, I think we could make some of those changes in Maryland it's already gotten so much better under Hogan, but the sky's the limit, I think, if we can get a few more seats.
Well, he did say in his campaign commercial that he has not raised taxes in his 4 years.
Yeah. And he's cut a lot of fees on small businesses and stuff. So he's done what he can, I think, to improve it without the real support of the legislature because of the demographics of it.
And another thing with taxes, which you have mentioned, which I'll bring up to you, is you talked about lower taxes for seniors.
I love it. Yeah, they're leaving. My parents left. My own parents said, "Why would we stay here when we can move to Texas, where they moved and established residency, and not pay the high taxes? It doesn't make sense for us." So I'm still hoping that once I get down there, I can coax them back. I don't know, but I'm hopeful.
Because I was going to say that you're right about that. I think one of the reasons so many people have left Maryland has been Texas. Delaware's right next door.
Yep. You wouldn't believe how many doors I knocked on of people 55 and older who said as soon as they can cut the cord, they're going to leave this state and go to Delaware. And it was sad. Even the ones that say it's so much better now, but I'm so afraid. Even if Hogan wins the next 4 years, what's going to come after that? Because Maryland is is just in general a disappointment to a lot of people in the retirement age.
Right. I mean, these are the average folks. I talk about don't have big pensions and things because they say, oh, well, the taxes are going to eat up what I'm getting every month.
I know. I would like to see some bills submitted, and I know they've tried before to get some tax incentives passed for seniors to stay in our state. So it's definitely something I'll put my name on every time I get the chance to.
Yeah, and then I know another thing that's an issue, and I'll bring it up sort of in two ways, about housing, in that we have had issues brought up here about how people have left Maryland also because they say, people coming into their district or coming into the state that they figure we're going to go somewhere else.
Oh yeah, I mean I moved out of my area where I lived in Perry Hall Parkville area because it didn't feel safe anymore. I mean, I had a drug dealer living on my street, and it wasn't safe anymore. And the community I represent now, or I will represent, they're not pleased with the changes. They don't want to see a lot of Section 8 brought in. It's so heavy down in Middle River, even in the Joppa area, certainly in the Perry Hall area, and it's the rising tide isn't lifting all the boats. It's not. It's bringing things down. So and I'm behind the community 100%. I don't want to see it either. It's part of why I left. So
because I know that's been a big thing about in Baltimore County at least about the designating areas that were richer areas that never took in Section 8 that they should now take in Section 8 like Towson and Parkville and Perry Hall and places like that.
Yeah.
And those communities are kind of in shock at that.
Yeah, it's not acceptable. It's not. I think it could have been done in a different way where there was maybe some research involved, some statistics looked at where if you put a child who's struggling in a class with a lot of kids who are doing well, that one child can be lifted up.
Right.
If you put 6 or 7 or 8 in a class of 30, the class will come down. So there's a balance that has to be struck, and I feel like Maryland and really the country has missed the mark on that completely. And so it needs to be rectified, I think.
And what about Maryland's position and your position on immigration?
Wow, that's a big subject for me.
Good.
I'm married to an immigrant, as you may know.
A Turkish man.
Yes, a Turkish man. He's wonderful. And so I have a lot of thoughts on immigration. It doesn't necessarily pertain to Maryland too much specifically, but I love immigration, obviously. I married an immigrant, but I do want to see thoughtful immigration. I do think we need a real reworking of our immigration system on the national level. Something that is more merit-based, I would like to see. There's nothing wrong with asking the people that are trying to become citizens to bring something to the table as well. We have a lot to offer here, and I don't think we should just give it away in a lottery system. I don't think we get the best and the brightest that way, and I think that's what America deserves. So I'd like to see that. I'd also like to see an expansion of our short-term work visas for seasonal employees. I know on the Eastern Shore, this doesn't really affect my district specifically, but on the Eastern Shore, they desperately need more of these,
people who come in and do the crab picking and stuff like that in the summer.
These are jobs that Americans traditionally will not do. They may have done it previously, but they won't do it today. There's some businesses in my district, landscaping businesses, for example. It's very hard for them to find people to employ, but they have a lot of interest, and a lot of people want to hire them, but they can't find employees. So from an immigration standpoint, I'd like to see an expansion of that. And it's certainly, whatever I can do to lend my voice to the national level politics, I'll suggest that at every chance I get.
But in Maryland, I understand, I think they passed it or not, I think they were giving immigrants driver's license that weren't citizens or have green cards. I think they were allowing people to vote that may not be citizens.
Yeah, huge.
That's in the state.
I know. It was an issue that I noticed when I went to get my driver's license. They never asked me. They just asked me if I wanted to register to vote. They never asked me if I could prove that I was eligible.
That you're a citizen.
Yeah, they didn't ask.
Show me your passport.
And I asked my husband. I said, "Did they ever ask you?" He's like, "No." And when my husband came, they issued a social immediately. So he had a social.
Okay.
He could have certainly been voting. Of course, he's an accountant, so he's very
Yes.
by the book,
Yes.
very, very by the book. But he said, yeah, I don't think there's anything that's stopping people who are immigrating here illegally or legally from voting in our elections. There's just nothing to prevent it. That's a huge problem.
That's kind of a shock in a way.
It's terrifying. They're trying to destroy our republic as far as I'm concerned.
Because you would think you'd have to be a citizen to be able to vote.
Yeah, it's the #1 requirement.
You know, in the sense this person is your president or your governor or whatever,
Right.
and these are people who may not be here legally.
Right. And it doesn't mean we dehumanize people.
No.
It just means that they can't vote.
Yeah.
It's as simple as that. You are just as much human, you are not as much citizen. So thank you, but no voting.
Now, another big issue, and I think it would be for you as a mother of 3 children, is education.
Yeah.
So speak to that.
I care deeply about education. You may, I'm not sure if I saw my website or not, but I actually homeschool my children.
Oh, you do? I didn't see that, no.
Yeah, I homeschool my children.
And why is that?
I'll tell you why.
Okay.
I have a hat that says, make Orwell fiction again.
Okay. Okay.
So that tells you a little bit about my personality.
All right.
But I have a healthy distrust of the government and federalizing education. I abhor it. I don't know how to say it nicer. I don't like federal education programs. I don't think the state of Maryland should be dictated to or given a carrot to for conforming to federal programs. I'm not a fan of that. And I've been very disappointed with Common Core, which was instituted pretty early in my oldest is 11. So there was just something, you know, I sent her to preschool and she loved it. You know, she's a rule follower, my oldest, and she would do great in school. But I didn't trust the curriculum. I didn't trust the curriculum, and when I was in public school, I felt like when I graduated, I went into the world thinking that America was the bully of the world.
Right.
And that we were not a great country. And that's what I learned in the public schools in Maryland 20 years ago.
Yeah.
So now, having traveled outside this country and spent, you know, I spend months a year in, you know, outside this country, actually.
Okay.
And I think America's absolutely the greatest country in the world.
Okay.
And I definitely didn't want my kids to get taught anything other than that. So that's a big part of why I ended up homeschooling my kids. I look forward to the day when I don't have to do that. And I'll certainly work towards a goal where I feel comfortable getting my kids back into public schools. But that day's not here today.
Now, wasn't that also part of what you're talking about, what pre-exists, is that you'd like to see more local control over curriculum?
Yes. I would like to see, I always say to people, you want to buy your vegetables local, you also want to buy your politics local. You know, if we can get it so that the counties even have control, where the parents can be involved, their voices can be heard, this is what we want for our children's education. Because at the end of the day, the buck stops with the parents. In Maryland, any parent can homeschool their child. So if parents en masse decide, this curriculum's not working for us, they can and they will pull their children out. I admin a page for homeschoolers in Harford County. I have done it for years. And when I took over the page, there was about 150 families. There is well over 500 families now in just a few years. That, yeah, it is massive.
And of course, it's been proven, I think, that homeschooled children perform much higher than do kids who go to regular schools and maybe even get into better colleges, do better on test scores, the whole thing.
Yeah, part of it is just it's a tailored education. So even if you're using a curriculum, when you're interacting with your child, you can pick up. So I use Singapore math, for example, for my daughter. And that's actually what Common Core was based off of. But when I'm interacting with her on that curriculum, if she doesn't need to use a certain methodology of finding the answer, I don't force her to use that method. Whereas in school, she must use that method.
Of course.
There's no other option. You know, 2 and 2 and 1 must be broken down to 1 and 1 and 1 and 1, or you get a failing grade.
Yeah.
And I don't do it like that when I'm teaching her at home. So that's probably why it's really tailor-made to each child.
And I think that most people would recognize that the problems is that school systems are driven by testing. And they're preparing kids for tests or what they need to know on these different tests, because a lot of those tests are then hooked in with federal or state funding.
That's exactly right.
But you're not really maybe teaching kids well or teaching them what would really help them in the real world someday.
You're absolutely right, and they can just flush the information. And I sat in Ways and Means once a few years ago for a different bill, but there was a bill about testing, and I heard teacher after teacher begging the state to stop. 60 days, they were saying, out of the year, these kids are spending on testing. Can you imagine what an incredible waste of their brilliant little minds?
Yes.
When you set them free, it shocks you what your children can learn. But you know, and I'm so proud that Hogan has gotten rid of Park. What an incredible waste of time. So I'm thrilled with that.
Now, something that leaped out that I saw, I want you to talk about your stance on guns and Second Amendment rights.
Yes, you know, I evolved over the years. You know, I grew up in a conservative family, but I would call them a moderate conservative family. You know, very Reagan-esque. My dad is, and we didn't own guns when I was a child. It wasn't a thing. I had family that did, but to me, you know, like I said, everything starts with the family, and ultimately the buck stops with me at that front door. And so gun rights to me is the difference between protecting my children and not. And the Second Amendment is maybe the most important thing that I have. I can't express it enough. I will not give it up.
Okay.
I will not give it up, and I will fight tirelessly to protect it, because it's life or death for my children, especially living in the country. It can take, you know, who knows how long if the police are on another call, for example. So, you know, to me, not having an understanding of firearms and seeing the importance in being able to protect your family is, yeah, it's a travesty. I wish more people took it more seriously.
Well, it said that you were advocate of wear and carry.
Absolutely. My husband and I are both working on getting our wear and carry licenses with the state of Maryland. As you know, it can be difficult, but small business owners are often, you know, allowed to do so, and that's something that we're working on. Because I would go pick up money from malls with my children at 9:30 at night, and I'd walk out with $6,000 in cash.
Wow.
You know, can you imagine? It's terrifying. So yeah, I'm a very big fan of wear and carry. Years ago, I thought it makes sense. Less guns equals less crime. That's logical. So I looked at the statistics, and you know, I have friends that Orthodox Jewish friends actually who said, just look at the statistics. And I said, okay, and I did. I looked at each state individually, and I analyzed their gun laws to see if there was any correlation with, you know, gun restrictions and crime, and there was none. Absolutely none. It's zero. There is no correlation between a state's gun restrictions and their crime rates. It's just simply not correlated. I mean, that's all the information I needed. I look at the statistics, and at the end of the day, what they tell me is the truth.
Well, certainly another thing, being rural in the sense of semi-rural, you're living on an 8-acre farm.
Yeah.
So that's kind of could be vulnerable
Absolutely.
to all kinds of attacks on your family or your property.
Yeah, predators. I have livestock guardian dogs as well. They are full-time working outdoor dogs. They do not come inside, much to the PETA dismay. Actually, I have a lot of friends who are vegans, and when I tell them that my dogs live full-time outdoors, I can see the tears welling up in their eyes. But, you know, this is their job. They're bred for this.
Right.
And they're bred for protecting my livestock, and they're bred for protecting my family.
Right.
So, yeah, but we're also well armed.
Very good.
And we have surveillance cameras. I don't mess around.
Oh, hey, there you go. Now, one last thing I want to get into, because we get into a whole bunch of other stuff. We could always have you back, or Pat will have you back.
Yeah, anytime.
That the small business, you are a small business owner. And
Yes.
when I had Governor Ehrlich in here, he has been a big advocate of saying how small businesses, or most of the businesses in this state, I don't know about in this country, and how we need to have better breaks. The government needs to help, the state government needs to help small businesses, nurture small businesses better, grants, starter grants, whatever you need.
Yeah.
You know, what is your position as a small business owner? How bad has it been for you, and how can it be better?
Yeah, it's hard. I mean, when my husband and I first started the accounting firm, that first year, he had left, you know, another firm, a larger firm, and he went off on his own. We made $13,000. That's our filed tax return.
Wow.
Can you imagine? Luckily, he had some money saved up.
Okay.
So we survived.
This was pre-children.
No.
Oh, wow.
This was not.
Oh, wow.
No, this was not pre-children. No.
Okay, did you file for?
We just had the one.
File for food stamps? No.
We did not. We did not. No. So,
Okay.
no. It was.
All right.
It's maybe a moral thing. I'm not sure.
I
I
understand.
didn't want to do it. We were eligible. Certainly eligible.
It was rough for you there.
Yeah, we were certainly eligible. Yeah. But no, we lived off of our savings, and we ate from BJ's a lot.
Okay.
Canned food was a big thing that year. But we did survive, and the company really did, almost double every year after that, which was really a blessing. But our business is different. Accounting is different.
Yes,
it has a very high profit margin and a very low overhead.
Right.
So for companies that have a much higher overhead, retail, things like that, that is very difficult. You may have seen Mayor Pugh actually rejected the $15 minimum wage that was unanimously passed because she herself is a small business owner.
Yes, she is. Yeah.
And she said, this will kill businesses like mine.
Right.
And I feel the same exact way. So I would love to see, tax incentives for the first few years, things like this expanded. I'm not a fan of forcing companies that are small to pay sick leave. Companies will simply leave this state.
Right.
They will leave the state, or they will sell, their businesses to larger companies, which is not what we want to see. We want to see these small families, these family-owned businesses grow and develop in our state, and they really do employ, like Governor Ehrlich says, a massive amount of people.
Right. And for me, it's always been my policy to give as much business as I can to small businesses and small business owners. I'd rather go to like a small local, even like the mom and pop restaurant instead of a McDonald's or something.
Absolutely.
These people are the ones that are struggling. They have their little cafe or something there.
Yeah.
They're the ones you should be giving. Get your coffee there. Don't go to Starbucks. That kind of stuff. Or Dunkin' Donuts or any of the big chains.
Right.
So if you can help it.
Yeah.
And so I'm always for that. In fact, we are a small business here.
You are, yeah, yeah.
And so we know what it's like to be struggling.
Yeah.
And so everybody could use that. It's the backbone of America, really.
I agree. And I think it's the future as well.
Well,
I really do.
hope so.
Yeah.
Now, unfortunately, I think we're going to have to stop this lovely conversation. And I want to ask you to look into the camera. You're going to tell people your contact information, how they can reach you and ask you questions or read more about your policy issues and your solutions.
Wonderful. So I have a website. It's electarchon.com. And you can also email me at electarchon@gmail.com. Anytime. I usually get back to people very, very quickly. So any questions, comments, suggestions, bills that you'd like to see, send them my way, and don't be brief. Give me the details.
Very good. So it was a pleasure having you here.
Yeah, you too. Really, such a pleasure.
All right. And so thank you.
Yeah, you too.
All right. And folks, unfortunately, we're at the end of another issue-laden and fun, politics can be fun sometimes, of our Maryland Politics show here on TV Free Baltimore. So until next time, or maybe Derek Sterling will be sitting in this chair, we'll see you then.
You're watching Maryland Politics here on TV Free Baltimore.
My name's Tony Campbell, and I approve this message. If you want the end of Common Core, if you want to protect our children, if you want a balanced budget in Washington, D.C., if you want to protect our veterans and make sure they get the care that they need, if you also want to end chain migration and a diversity lottery, then I'm your candidate for United States Senate. My name's Tony Campbell. I'm a Republican for United States Senate, paid for by Campbell for Maryland.
Hi. Hi. I'm Dawn Wells, and guess what? You are watching TV Free Baltimore.
7 Principles of Libertarianism by Alex Merced. Self-ownership, the idea that you own yourself and your body and your property. non-aggression, the idea that no one should initiate force on you or your property. Voluntarism, the idea that arrangements and institutions in society are based on voluntary participation. Free exchange, the idea that individuals are free to exchange their property in the arrangements they see fit. Decentralization, the idea that centralized power is easily corruptible and more dangerous, so that power should be decentralized through a market process instead of centralized through a political process. Property rights, the idea that society should have well-defined definitions of what is property and protect the individual's right to own property. Individualism, the idea that all individuals have equality of rights and that should not be punished or privileged at the cost of another because some abstract association with the idea of a group. Learn more about libertarianism by subscribing to the following podcasts: The Alex Merced Cast, The Tom Woods Show, Lions of Liberty, The Johnny Rocket Launchpad, The Jason Stapleton Program, The Remzo Republic. Also, check out these websites: fee.org, Mises.org, Cato.org, Reason.com, LibertarianWingMedia.com, and TheLibertarianRepublic.com. My name is Alex Merced. Subscribe to my podcast, The Alex Merced Cast, and like me on Facebook at facebook.com/AlexMercedLP.
If you want better from Washington, and who doesn't, what do you want from your representative in Congress? If you're looking for someone who has compiled a record of accomplishment during his 12 years in the U.S. House, it's not John Sarbanes. If you're looking for someone who can take the healthcare innovations being pioneered right here in Maryland down to Washington as remedies to the Affordable Care Act, it's not John Sarbanes. If you're looking for someone who has proven through his actions a sincere respect for the voting rights and the voting power of all his constituents, it is definitely not John Sarbanes. And if you're looking for someone who has refused to engage in blind partisanship, who has refused to stoke the hysteria in Washington, it is also definitely not John Sarbanes. So if you want better from Washington, vote for me, David Lasher, who has accomplished both inside and outside of government. Me, David Lasher, who knows the innovative Maryland model for health care and will take it to Washington to repair the Affordable Care Act. Me, David Lasher, who will reduce the power of money, incumbency, and party bosses, who will promote political competition and expand voter choice. Me, David Lasher, who will engage in forthright but respectful debate. Restore your voice, restore your vote, make history. With me, David Lasher, Libertarian for Congress, this November. Thank you.
Hey, Penn Jillette here. Being a libertarian means being skeptical of power. Skeptical there's one way to do things. Is there going to be one way of living that's going to make you, Justin Bieber, Pat Robertson, Marilyn Manson, Hillary Clinton, me, and your Aunt Olga all equally happy? It all comes down to this. Maybe I know the best way to live my life, but wow, I sure don't know the best way to live yours. So why not err on the side of more freedom, respect for what makes us different? If you think a little bit like I do and want to learn more, go to libertarianism.org. We've got podcasts and videos, original source material, and essays all about the idea of using a little more liberty. Libertarianism.org. Be just like me.
This is my jump shot. Trash ball, I need decay. Everybody wins, let me show you how to play. Well, when you pick up some trash, pretend it's a ball, and then you throw it in the bucket, you're playing a trash ball. A jump shot hook, you gotta put it away. We're gonna play that trash ball every day.
Come on, Baltimore, play ball and keep it clean.
Hey there, folks. This is Lenny Rudo from Fish Talk Magazine, and you're watching TV Free Baltimore. Hey there, folks. This is Lenny Rudo from Fish Talk Magazine, and you're watching TV Free Baltimore.
Some people have a deep, abiding respect for the natural beauty that was once this country. And some people don't. People start pollution. People can stop it.
This is Sam with Restore Computer Repair in Baltimore, Maryland. If you're having any computer problems whatsoever with your Mac or PC, desktop or laptop, we can fix it at a guaranteed lowest price. We're located at 8701 Harford Road in Parkville, Maryland, 21234. You can reach us at 443-725-5050. That's 443-725-5050. We're open Monday through Friday, 10 a.m. to 5:30 p.m., and Saturdays, 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. You can reach us at www.restorecomputerrepair.com.
Hey guys, Johnny Alonzo, and you're watching TV Free Baltimore.
Vino's Liquors and Bar. When you're looking for something a little bit more sophisticated, a little bit more Saturday night, a little bit more downtown. Vino's Liquors and Bar, located at 3811 Old North Point Road in Dundalk, Maryland.
If you live and travel in the National Capital Region, you know how bad traffic congestion is on the roadways. Today, the Capital Beltway carries nearly 250,000 travelers each day, and is congested approximately 10 hours a day. I-270 carries more than 260,000 people and is congested approximately 7 hours a day, and those numbers are projected to increase. That's why the Maryland Department of Transportation, MDOT, has introduced an innovative plan to reduce congestion on these and other roads in the state, the Maryland Traffic Relief Plan. This system of systems will keep Maryland citizens and the Maryland economy moving and thriving. The Traffic Relief Plan on I-495 and I-270 is looking at transformative improvements along the entire stretch of both interstates. This massive effort will be a public-private partnership, or P3. A P3 is a method of delivering public infrastructure projects, such as highway improvements, with an agreement between a public owner, such as MDOT SHA, and a private entity. The private entity will perform functions normally undertaken by the state, which may include designing, building, financing, operating, and maintaining a transportation facility. The I-495 I-270 P3 program will focus on transformative improvements along over 70 miles of interstate, the full lengths of I-495 and I-270. The first element of the I-495 and I-270 P3 program is called the I-495 and I-270 Managed Lane Study. This is an environmental study extending along I-495 from south of the American Legion Bridge in Virginia to east of the Woodrow Wilson Bridge, and along I-270 from I-495 to I-370, including the east and west I-270 spurs. The Federal Highway Administration, as the lead federal agency, and M.SHA, as the local project sponsor, will prepare an Environmental Impact Statement, or an EIS, for the I-495 and I-270 Managed Lane Study. This will be done in accordance with the National Environmental Policy Act, also known as NEPA, and other legal mandates. The EIS will document the project scoping process, purpose and need development, corridor alternative analysis and screening, traffic and environmental analyses, and public and agency involvement. Your input is vital to the NEPA process, beginning with the initial scoping and comment period. The Federal Highway Administration and M.SHA are seeking input from all interested individuals, organizations, and public agencies on the scope of the study, including the purpose and need, potential alternatives to be studied, environmental impacts to be considered, and evaluation methods to be used. More information on public outreach activities, including future public workshops, will be available on the study website, www.495-270-p3.com. Throughout the study, we invite you to check the project website to learn more. You can also sign up to be notified of events and opportunities in connection with the study, and you can contact us via email through the website. The I-495 and I-270 Managed Lane Study brings NDOT's traffic relief plan to the most congested roads in the state, reducing drive times and helping to connect all Marylanders to life's opportunities. We look forward to hearing from you.
The next show will start in 1 minute.
Welcome to TV Free Baltimore's Books and Authors.
Hello, Paul Stefan here, and welcome to another edition of TV Free Baltimore's Books and Authors. Today, we have a very interesting storyteller here. As I say here at our station, we say that everybody has a story and we're here to tell it. This is a gentleman who is a published poet, but also works as a Baltimore City police officer. And I'm talking about Edward Doyle-Gillespie. Welcome, Ed.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Now, what I want to be able to ask first is looking at your background, which is impressive academically. You know, George Washington, history. Right. And then you go to Johns Hopkins for MLA.
Right.
Which is what exactly?
Master of Liberal Arts.
Master of Liberal Arts, okay. And first of all, what was that transition from history to liberal arts coming? Why did you get then a master's in history?
Well, you know, it's funny. I got my degree in history and I became a teacher.
Right.
I taught in Baltimore City Public Schools for a little while. I did museum curation. I taught social studies, history, English. I taught at Baltimore Friends. And then I started doing curriculum writing for a foundation, a Johns Hopkins Foundation, the Success for All Foundation. So I had already immersed myself. I kind of took history and broadened it into how do I interweave it with philosophy and literature and sociology and things like that. And so the Master of Liberal Arts seemed like a natural progression. Coming to understand myself as a liberal arts person and a humanities person. And it was great. It was a great move that seeing how things are interconnected. It was the way I always thought. Like when I taught history, I used a lot of literature, I used a lot of philosophy, I used music, which was great. I used science, you know. And so that was a fun. I missed the program. I had a great time.
I bet you did.
Yes.
Now, the interesting is then there comes a time where there is this, you know, career change that, you know, first of all, at a later age than most guys go into the police academy.
Right.
You were about 35.
I was 35.
And why did you go from a career in academia to a career in public safety?
You know, I had tried to be a U.S. Marine Corps officer when I was in undergrad, and I injured my back. Wasn't able to do that. I always wanted to work in public defense and public safety and that type of thing, and be in that type sort of an organization. And 9/11 really was the pivotal thing for me. That was supposed to be my first day of grad school. So I resolved to get my master's degree, earn a black belt, then go and be a public guardian. And so that's what I did. It was I was in the first academy class in 2005. I was in 0501.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, why Baltimore City?
You know, that people ask me, that's where I lived.
Oh, you were living in Baltimore City at the time?
Yes, yes.
Not Philly? Or
No. I had just been teaching in Baltimore Friends. I was working in Towson, about to go to Hopkins. I was in Baltimore City, and I wanted to start my career in law enforcement right where I was.
Knowing, even then, how rough this city can be and how the police force can be, to say that you say, okay, I'm going to pick this jurisdiction.
Right. Yes.
And was it for you, at the beginning, we'll say, was it a tough transition or adjustment? Because it's unusual to see a lot of people who's going to all start out on the street and to be a beat cop, to have all the education you had, which I think was probably a lot more than many patrolmen, and the fact that you were maybe at least 10 or more years older than the average patrolman.
Right.
And I don't know that they knew at the time, but because, I mean, I'm going to not maybe hang myself here, we can bleep it if we have to, but in a police force, there are people who are a little less forward thinking, that people who would know, oh, and yeah, and by the way, he's in a mixed marriage. You know,
Sure.
to say, were any of these things difficult for you? Did you meet
know,
any hurdles or
all of those things,
obstacles?
All of those things were a part of it. Got a lot of, well, why are you here? You know, are you here to write a book? And actually, from what I understand, you know, it was years later. I was talking to a woman who'd been one of my instructors, and she said, you know, everyone on staff thought you were there just to gather information to write a book for like a thesis for Hopkins or something, and you know, we were kind of surprised that you stayed on. And but all of those things were part of the adventure. They really were. I mean, the education piece was kind of part and parcel of a whole cultural difference. I mean, I grew up in an upper middle class, rather basically suburban area. I had a PhD for a father. I went to a private school for 13 years. I traveled all over the place, and now I was working in Sandtown, Winchester. So I was working with people whose life experiences were vastly different than mine, and the culture that produced those life experiences was not something organic to me. I teach a lot about implicit bias. I teach a lot about the origins of bias and how it influences us. And in retrospect, I can definitely say that when I worked in Bolton Hill, when I worked in Seton Hill, when I worked in places that were middle class or upper class and were more reflective of what I'd grown up with, I deported myself differently. I spoke differently. I had a different comfort level. And so a big part of policing was learning different cultures, learning myself, learning my biases, and learning my strengths and my weaknesses by being kind of this fish out of water. And then how I began to adapt to it in my way.
I was going to say, you said started in Sandtown, Winchester, so wasn't it not just for them with you, but for you with them, a culture shock?
Oh, completely. Oh, it was a total culture shock, yeah. I mean, whether it was, I couldn't understand sometimes the vernacular that people used. I also had to recognize, I don't know what it's like to have food anxiety. I don't know what it's like to have, to grow up in a neighborhood in which it's internationally known for violence. I'm not, or to have a low level of education, to have to fill out, to have to sign a police document and not be able to read it. And this is something, it called on, as much as this job has called on strength for me, as much as it's called on a propensity for strength and for an ability to deport myself with a type of elan and a type of fortitude, it's also called for empathy. It's called for a lot of empathy. It's called for a lot of humanism. To understand that I won a lottery. That any one of us, we won a lottery. I could have been born to a family in Sandtown, Winchester, and had malnutrition and lived in a food desert and all the things that I didn't have to experience. So I've grown in so many ways.
Because I mean, I would think hard, because again, my background's in psychology and social work, that for the people in those communities, if, I mean, initially they're not going to know you.
Right.
But if they got to know you or tried to, a lot of them try to get on your side and say, hey man, you're one of us, you know?
It was funny.
And I mean, culturally, you know,
sure.
but
well,
you're
well,
not.
See, that's the thing. It's we tend to conflate race and culture in our society, don't we?
Yes.
Because we tend to kind of go for the easy sell. It's like, well, okay, you know, this very binary. You know, you're this race, you've got these characteristics and these qualities, and let alone trying to distinguish what ethnicity is, and you know. But one thing I found was quite a few people that I encountered there went through a kind of cognitive dissonance. Because they said, well, you look like us, but you certainly don't deport yourself like us. This doesn't make sense. You're an immigrant. And so...
And I said, oh, you must be African, Caribbean.
Absolutely.
Yes.
And it was, I mean, constant thing. Where, I mean, I had supervisors, you know, if people come to them and say, you know, that African officer was up here and he gave me a ticket for nothing. And the supervisor's still African officer. And he's like going through his head as to who the officers on the shift are. And he's like... well, he's from Africa, but he's not up here, you know. And they were like, who? That Gillespie. Like, he's not African, and you know. But for many people there, I mean, quite a few, to the point that I would encounter people like, oh, I heard about you. You're the African officer. And it's funny because in at least one more circumstances from that, I played along and I just said, because if it broke down the cognitive dissonance and I could get, you know, it's like I'm trying to get information from someone, and this woman just kept saying, remember this one woman, and she just kept saying, where are you from? Where are you from? Why do you talk that way? And I finally said, I'm Canadian. And she said, oh, okay. And then she gave me all the information. Things were now clear and neat in her head.
Well, to me, for example, what's sad is, to me, on the people you're talking to, the people in the communities, from their perspective, it's almost like they're saying, you know, an African-American person from the city can't be educated, can't be articulate.
Right.
They're supposed to be like us. And I've had this other people, you know, that sense of inbred kind of despair.
Right. And it's, you know, people create whatever sphere they have to feel safe. They create their spheres, I call them terrariums in many cases, even if what I'm creating isn't logical. If it keeps me safe, it keeps my ego safe particularly. We're not talking, I mean, you could go up and down Maslow's hierarchy as to where this fits in, but if I feel qualified with what I'm doing, then great. And I encountered that with, you know, and it's funny because the police force is so diverse. It's so very diverse that, I mean, I've encountered officers who were equally well educated, and we've had great conversations, and I've encountered officers who said, you know, wow, what can I learn from you? You know, because I mean, I've been very open. I'm like, look, I've got a lot to learn from you guys. I don't know how to work the streets. You know, you handle weapons more than I do, so let me learn from you. I learned a lot from, and that's the thing about intelligence. You know, I learned a lot from these guys. There are lots of different types of intelligence. And then I did encounter officers who said, you know, you have no place here. I said, well, these were the requirements and I passed them. Well, but this isn't a job for people like you. Why are you like this? Why are you here? And I had one guy say to me, you know, guys like you are ruining this job. You know, but it's not I mean, you have a broad variety of officers with a broad variety of experiences. And one thing I did was I kept my writing kind of separate. I wasn't really very open about the fact that I was writing. And I used it as a kind of release. Also, you know, it was a cathartic thing I would do outside of work. And so I didn't find myself writing about policing for a long time.
Well, I was going to say, how long were you actually on the street?
I have done a total of 3 years of patrol, going call to call. I was for, I think, about 3 years in a unit called the Pennsylvania Avenue Task Force, which did special work up and down Pennsylvania Avenue. I've worked larceny from auto. I did, so those were all outside, you know. I did intelligence work, and I was in written directives also, so I was in, out, but I spent a good 6 years on the street, 6, 7 years on the street, yeah.
Right. And I was going to say, part of it is, when then did you go to the academy? When did you were appointed to the academy?
It's been about 5 years now.
5 years?
I think, yeah.
So that maybe the police force at some point said, well, we're going to use this guy's education to our benefit.
Yeah, I had to put in for it a few times. I love it. I'm really very happy with it.
So I think you said in a little way, I was going to ask what you learned from policing, from the street. And one of the things I read about you, it said something about you were impacted by going to, I think, your first murder. And that was a story.
Yeah, it was, we were sitting, it's funny, we were sitting and talking with the cars, kind of, you know, one of those police rituals where you park the car so you can talk to the other guy. And a call came out for a cutting. We got there, and this young man had been stabbed. And I remember him, I was running towards where he was lying cruciform in the street, and I remember him kind of turning his head and looking up at me, and I saw him
take his final breath?
Yeah, take his final breath. And, you know, you download things, you know, everything you encounter in policing, you kind of collect it. And then you keep those stories with you, and then you, depending upon what type of processor you are, you process that story. Ursula Le Guin, the science fiction writer, talks about the carry bag concept of civilization. She says, you know, she felt that the first tool was not a stabbing device or a lever, but she felt it was probably a bag of some sort. And then she uses that as a metaphor for, you know, stories and at the same time, I think of that. I think of the old tradition from the British Isles of the Sin Eater, if you call that, the person who goes, that someone's dying and, well, gosh, you know, what if we could collect their sins in a soul cake, and the Sin Eater comes along and collects all this negativity. And so it was like, I could literally feel this kind of, you know, download into me. And so that, I definitely did some writing about that moment.
I was going to say, was that murder that you witnessed, you just described, was that the subject of your poem, The Final Hajj?
It was, yes.
It was?
Yes, that was the one.
Because it really does describe that whole experience, I do believe, in quite a way. And now, at the Academy, you know, and I read an article about that and your work there from The Atlantic. And what is it that, what are the topics, the subjects that you teach there?
Okay, well, I teach counterterrorism. I teach CBRN, which is chemical, biological, radiological, and nuclear survival.
Okay.
That was getting prepared for that was wild. We went to Anniston, Alabama, and went through rooms of nerve gas. That was
okay.
I also teach ethics, community policing, procedural justice. I teach a leadership. Well, I teach some things within under a leadership umbrella, and so I was kind of given carte blanche as to how I wanted to do some of this.
I was going to say, you using, let's say, literature and the humanities to describe some of these things or to create your lessons is a novel idea.
Right.
And did the higher people that are the top, the people that the higher powers in the academy say, what? You know, I don't know if we've never seen it. I don't, they gave you permission to do that.
Sure. I went to my supervisor, first supervisor, and I said, I'd like to do an ethics class, and I want to use Plato's idea of the tripartite soul. I'm just going to distill that from the Republic and talk about the idea of the golden mean of the mind, or, you know, it would have been ultimately Plato talking about the prefrontal cortex, how it has to work with the fighting spirit to control the appetites. So the prefrontal cortex having some sort of control over the amygdala, and how we make decisions, and how we make ethical decisions, and what happens when officers don't allow that logical thought and that projected thought to. And he said, what are you talking about? And so I said, well, let me show you. And so one thing I have to do, of course, is say, okay. So I showed him, and he said, well, okay, run with it and see what you can do with it. And to be able to say, okay, first of all, to acknowledge my audience and say, look, guys, I know this seems weird, but I think there's something for us to know here. Because think about it, we're police officers. The Western world means a lot. The development of Western thought. It's a big deal when you put on that badge. There's a reason why we're expected to do what we do, why we've raised the questions that we have, right? So I said, just roll with me here. We're going to come back to Baltimore. First, we're going to ancient Greece. We're going to talk about this, right? So we put that together. I let them play with it for a while. Then I say, and so I made sure to acknowledge it. Some of them are kind of rolling their eyes and saying, what the heck is this guy doing?
Right.
And so I made sure to put up a slide that had the most, hard-bitten cops from popular culture on it, kind of ground. What does this have to do with being a cop? Right. So then I went to cases of police corruption from around the country. And I said, now let's read this. I gave them the cases. I said, read this. Now, what would Plato say was this cop's problem? What's the issue here? And they kept coming back to, you're not using your rational brain. You're letting your amygdala take over here. Your desire for greed, your greed, your desire for sex, your desire for, whatever, to override what an officer should be doing. And so based on that, I mean, the main thing has been, this is what some of the great thinkers of the Western world have said about authority, have said about public service. Is this reflected in what we do? I'm making a lot of work of James Baldwin lately, which is
okay. So do you feel that in the years you've done it for a while now, and I understand you only have like 2 weeks with these people a year?
Yes. It's been a week long, it's been 2 weeks long. But yes,
but I'm just saying, that's not a lot of time, and a lot of these people, like you say, or maybe not past the 12th grade in education. Do you feel that the amount of time that you have and the people you're working with, do you make an impact? And what kind of impact do you think you've made?
I feel it's been good. And don't forget, of those 2 weeks, I have very small. I might have 2 hours here, an hour there.
Okay.
So I distill what they need. If I can get down to, here is this writer, here's one of his big ideas. And let's get back to it. And I'll mix that in with popular culture. I'll mix that in with, stuff they've been through. A big part of teaching adults, of course, is saying to them, what have you seen? How has this been reflected on what you've seen? I'm doing something using Kant now. Okay, so I talk about deontology. Deontology and teleology. Well, what does that mean? Well, okay, deontology is, I have to do the right thing right now, even if what comes out of it is wrong. So, the right thing right now is, I have to let you go. I had you stopped. There's nothing more to be done. Goodbye. I don't know what you're going to go off and do. You might be a bad guy, but right now, you're an innocent. Teleology is that corrupt cop who says, I will do anything to get you. So I have to talk, and, they're pretty sharp. Maybe, some of them have phenomenal vocabularies and are very well educated. Lots of them, it's such a diverse group. They get by, the way they can, but they're pretty sharp. And I mean, when I present it in certain ways, they usually link in. And I said, one thing I love to bring up with them is Kant said, that which would be your maxim, let it be universal law. I try to bring that up at least once in class, because the big deal is, if you think the police should behave this way now, make sure you want to live in a world in which the police behave this way all the time. They'll treat your son this way. They'll treat your mom this way, right? And I see a lot of nodding heads in class. Even the ones that are cynical, there's a bunch of me. They get it, I've learned a lot. I've learned that maybe a person who would never set foot in Johns Hopkins University is still a pretty acute person. Is pretty sharp. Maybe he'll have his way of saying it or her way of articulating it, but they can keep me on my toes. They're actually some pretty smart. It's funny. I work with academics and I work with cops, and I've seen different types of intelligence, and I've seen different. I worked with people at Johns Hopkins who had multiple degrees, and I work with cops who have GEDs. But as I talk to them and listen to them, I learn intelligence comes in different flavors and it comes in different styles, and
Have you had then, after they've done your class and maybe years later, have you had people give you any positive feedback?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely, yeah. I've had people come back to me and say, you know, I thought about your class the other day because I was in this situation. I've had people come to me after class and say, hey, you know, I had this thing happen to me, and, you know, what do you think of this? And so, yeah, and even I do a class on sovereign citizen extremists, if you're familiar with that, but they're extremists that refuse to acknowledge the U.S. government, and they have a whole kind of delusional mindset, but they're all over the country, they're all over the world. And I actually had an officer say to me, I was able to diffuse a situation with one of these people because of what I learned in one of your classes.
There you go.
Yeah, so that's
good.
It's very gratifying.
It's good. And I was going to say then, to transition more, because it's interesting that you are a policeman that's a poet. And you say, do you keep that kind of down low with your colleagues or not?
Not as much as I used to. I kind of bifurcated my life for a while, but no, I've let it out more and more, and I have, you know, I've had people that on the department buy my book, and you know, and I think I kind of laid some fertile soil. I think I kind of earned that it was like, well, he's kind of weird anyway. He's into this, you know.
So it's okay that he's a poet.
Yeah, and we have had a few cops that were writers. You know, often it was prose and you know, fiction, and I have some of that coming along too. I've got a science fiction piece. I have a few science fiction pieces going actually, and I've got a few novels in the offing.
Hear a little bit about that towards the end, I hope.
Sure.
Now, the one question would be, because to make that transition, is how has policing affected your poetry?
Oh my gosh, it's had a powerful effect on it. It really has.
So it's like there are the impact and after the impact of policing.
When they're doing the scholarship on me, you know, going from
the early period.
The early period work, and then this is once he transferred to policing. Yes.
Yes.
There's a greater sense of place. There's a greater sense of place with work now, and place being the space where something is, the space that is now given meaning because of human action. Baltimore is a wildly unique character. I just finished reading a book that, well, it's funny, I'm reading Giovanni's Room, and I just finished Confederacy of Dunces. Giovanni's Room takes place in Paris, Confederacy of Dunces in New Orleans. And in both cases, the city itself is a type of character. It's like, this character would not be doing these things and behaving this way and saying what she's saying or doing what he's doing were they not in this particular place at this particular time. And Baltimore is very much like that, which is just one thing that I find. I've found Baltimore more and more fascinating since becoming a
place really has become maybe a character or a presence, we'll say, in your poems.
Baltimore as a place is speech. It's conflict. You know, the unique conflicts of Baltimore. It's smells. It's and why does this smell exist in this place? Why does this image exist in this place? You know, and it's funny because policing will provide these great, powerful metaphors that that you'll see, and I carry them home with me. I remember one evening going home and having to throw away my sweater. I had to get rid of it. And head home because it was so saturated with blood. And I left where I worked and went back to where I live, which is a different part of Baltimore, and getting this stain off of me before I went into this other Baltimore was like really pivotal. Like I had to get get
it off.
Get it off, right. But yeah, it's I'm fascinated. I continue to be fascinated by the city.
Now, with your poetry, who have been your influences? They may not have all have been poets, but who are your influences, or who are some of your favorites who inspired you?
I was thinking about that. Ginsberg is one.
Allen Ginsberg.
Allen Ginsberg. I actually got to meet him.
You did? Before he died?
Yeah, before he died. I think I was like 25, maybe.
How?
I met him, this was when I was younger than 25. This is when I first lived in Baltimore. We came to Baltimore for 3 years right out of college, and I met him at MICA.
Oh, okay.
He was giving a reading at Micah. I carried his stool and his box of poems. I carried his stool, my wife carried his box of poems. And I sat down next to him for a bit. He goes, "Where are you from, kid?" You know, and we talked a little bit. And I love how direct and raw and angry his poetry is. Along those same lines, I love Anne Sexton and Sylvia Plath, two of my favorites. Those two, once again, spoke very directly and very, very unapologetically, and are so much a part of feminism, and said it very clearly. Broadening just to writers in general, like I said, Baldwin, James Baldwin,
sure.
His work is powerful. James Baldwin, Ernest Hemingway, Steinbeck.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah. Joseph Conrad.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
And,
Heart of Darkness.
Yes, Heart of Darkness. I think I have reread Heart of Darkness like 3 times since I've been a police officer.
Wow.
That
book gets to you, huh?
I keep going back. Heart of Darkness, my mom used to teach Heart of Darkness. And I've been back to Heart of Darkness, And I read, not The Road, Cormac McCarthy, I think I'm drawing a blank, but...
It's okay.
Okay, but I kind of sat back at one point and said, you know, what do I see in terms of the writers that really inspire me? And they are just very direct. There's a certain, I like how powerful, you know, using direct, powerful language speaks to me.
Yeah, because I think something you may have quoted you saying is that you like the rawness and the exhilaration of what it means to be bare.
Right. When you have those moments, I really have found that I'm even if it's a very painful thing, there's something very genuine and unique. You know, when you are in pain or someone else is in pain or happy or whatever, just people being very candid about their emotions. And doing police work, you see people stripped bare constantly. You see them, you know, you see their pretenses and their affect kind of stripped away. Milan Kundera talks about
the unbearable lightness of being.
Yes, and in that book, he talks about every culture having its kitsch, you know, and it's the expletive that he used for excrement. But I mean, and you know, seeing people get away from their personal kitsch.
Yeah.
You know,
But I would think you might also be affected. But the person I was affected by was William Faulkner.
Yes.
And one of his books, and I'm from high school, and it never left me after all these years, called Light in August. And it's about this guy, African-American, whose name is Christmas. And his last name is Christmas. And all the stuff that he goes through. And of course, all his poor white farmers and all of that. And it's kind of, you know, despairing, but also life-affirming, but kind of prose.
That's great. It's on my shelf. I'll read that now.
Is there? Light in August?
It is on my shelf.
Now, for example, where do your ideas come from?
They just come. I mean, I get them from, I kind of absorb them as I'm moving around. And also we listen to music and read, but there are these distilled images, and it's funny because people will kind of, it's almost like someone throwing something out, not really recognizing, do you realize what you just threw out? That thing you just said, that image do you realize how powerful that image is? Like what? You know, and I'm sure I do it for people too, that, you know, I've said, you know, very casually about, you know, some aspect of my life or whatever, and someone will go, oh my gosh. You know, right?
Now, what would you say if somebody asked what your topics and what your themes are?
I really like the idea of identity, how people define themselves, how people struggle to define themselves. I think that's huge. I think conflict, how people handle conflict, how people absorb conflict. I'm always fascinated by the person who defines themselves in terms of conflict. That, like, you know, what happens when this conflict is gone? You know, what happens when I finally win? If this has been so much a part of my life, whatever that happens to be.
For some people, it's all about the struggle.
Exactly. Exactly.
Now, it was said by somebody that the themes of your poetry are sex, violence, and myth.
My buddy, that's my oldest friend, Sean.
Okay.
Yeah, he said, you know, I've been reading your work because I sent it to him to edit. And he looks at it, he says, you know, you kind of live in the amygdala a lot of the time. Yeah, not just sex, sexuality, sensuality, who we are at that moment, who we are in that distilled moment of violence. I mean, you know, there's the fetishized moment of violence and the, you know, the pornographic moment of violence or the pornographic moment of sex. It's like, but what's going on inside? There's that internal moment. Like, what does it leave in you? What does it leave behind?
I saw some imagery in some of your poems that actually touches on Islam. You know, too.
Right, right.
You know, like I said, the final Hajj, another one called Hijab. You know, different ones that bring that up about the Middle East anyway, kind of flavor.
I've really, you know, I've only visited the Islamic world once. I was in Morocco, but I've been fascinated when I've talked to people who visited there, who fought, or when I've talked to people who come from these cultures and whose lives are guided by the ideas of Islam. It's funny because I kind of looking at the span of people I've known and experiences I've had. I was having conversations with this guy, very right-wing veteran, who was very drawn to me because I'm a law enforcement officer, and he was like, you know, you're a warrior and I'm a warrior, and you know, and as we talked, he just turned out to be so incredibly Islamophobic. And I would go back and forth with him about this, and you know, he had these very kind of fanciful ideas about Islam. So I had a Muslim partner at the time, and I was talking to him, and I said, you know, I got to stop communicating with this guy. The things he's saying, I can't deal with this. And this friend of mine, he says, no, you have to teach him. And he said, I know you are not religious. I know you do not believe. He said, but I think he was given to you for a reason, and you have to teach him.
Okay.
And it was a fascinating. I mean, I was just kind of imagining these dynamics pulling back and forth. But you know, and I kind of wanted to say, you know, the reason I'm still talking to you is because a Muslim guy told me I'm supposed to fix you. You know?
Well, there you go. I mean, another thing was said about your poem that you like to have, or you're attracted to, that says is elemental and existential influences.
Okay, yeah. I mean, really, when people are stripped bare, I mean, who are you really? And it's funny, it's funny now that you just said that. I remember when we were training with our firearms, there was a bunker, like a frame. We were supposed to kind of get up, it's like a doorway, and we were supposed to get up to this. And someone wrote the words, "Who are you?" on the it's some piece of equipment. I don't know if it's still around somewhere on our range in Baltimore. But yeah, the idea of who people really are when you strip down the pretense. When, you know, I mean, I've seen people when their loved one just died, they watch their loved one die. Or I've talked to officers after they've had to use force and things like that. And I mean, and of course, a big part of it is I've looked at myself when, you know, who did I feel I was when I've had a moment where I've had to use force, or I've had to, you know, deal with the fact I was so very angry with someone, you know, or so very exhilarated, and it's like that moment. So is this you? You know, is it you when you've got all of your defenses up? Is that you because you're at your healthiest, or is this you because you're not? You know, I'm always really drawn to that. You know,
and you're going, I think, ultimately you're going for the truth.
Right.
You know,
exactly.
In a sense, your true self, whoever that is at the time, or just the truth of a moment, or whatever it might be.
Right.
Now, I want to get into some of your poems, because I did, you know, read them all, actually. And there were different ones that I liked. And there's certain ones, and I thought, you don't know, we have time to really read them all. I mean, I'm of the 8 or 9 that I liked.
Okay, sure.
But even though they're rather short, all of them. But there were a few that really spoke to me. And I would think if there were times, and if you want to read them, or if you even have favorites that you like to read, but I'll tell you one of the ones that struck me very strongly was called Sometimes He Comes Down.
Oh, okay.
Do you want to read that one?
Sure. That was, I believe, in this one.
I think it's in both books, I think.
Is it
or
in
is
both
it- I'm not
books?
sure which
Okay.
book it's in. But you'll find it. I'm
Sure. Actually,
this one has at least this one at least has a table of contents.
Isn't that great? So see how I
Sometimes He Comes Down in this one.
progressed
I think.
over time.
Oh. Yes, it is. I think
Yep,
it's page
38.
38.
38, yes.
Yeah, Sometimes He Comes Down is a great one, I think. Okay. And what it says about what we've been talking about.
Sometimes he comes down. Sometimes he comes down from the bridge where they hanged him. He comes, still walking with that shuffle, as if his shoes are too big, snapping off twigs, looking through windows at the sleeping folk, the children, the wives, the men with lined faces. He comes, still playing with that one loose button he tried to stitch up the night before they came down to the bottoms looking for him, or some other buck field hand who'd do just as well. You know he's come down because you can feel the wind when there isn't supposed to be any, and the tall grass leans the wrong way. Sometimes the dogs get beside themselves, biting at their ropes and scratching to get back into the ramshackle houses. Sometimes he comes down through the reeds to cross the tracks, to climb the hill, and find those that did it, just to see how those old men sleep.
Now, yeah, certainly I think that's powerful, actually, very powerful.
Well, thank you.
I mean, the imagery it certainly gives me is someone who had been lynched.
Right.
And, that was your inspiration there to say?
Yeah,
the guilt of the survivors kind of a thing many years later? Or? What is your meaning to that?
I've always been struck by, I like myth and folk tales and the stories of the South. They're so laden with pain and so laden with conflict, and so many cultures of storytellers came together there, whether it was West Africa or the British Isles and Native Americans, that these stories are alive there. And so, yeah, it does come down to this question of still looking for the human quality. The looking for the human quality, looking for the sense of empathy. I recently read how the men who lynched Emmett Till, after they were found not guilty, did an interview and said, "Yes, we lynched him, and here's why." The fact that this was so heavily laden in the culture there, that I imagine it taking on a life of its own. Because there would be the question, well, is there any guilt? I mean, you see some of these people interviewed years later and said, well, we had to do that, of course. I mean, clearly. It's unfortunate we had to. This is what we do. This is our peculiar institution.
Right. And it was in the wind in your poem, too.
Exactly, right.
And the dogs could sense it. So that's why I thought that was a great poem. And then there was another one I liked very much. Was called, I think, Through Elephant Grass.
Oh, okay, right.
It might be in that one, too.
Yeah.
Okay. In that book.
There we go, 20. Yes. Through Elephant Grass. This is a story about the same man and the same town, only both grown older. The main street has sprouted like a forgotten potato, reaching out with eyes and fingers where there used to be empty fields. And the man in the diner now talks the way old men do, with broad, shapeless hands that need thin air as though he were conjuring a djinn. He is still in love with the waitress who has blonde hair and skin like raw honey. And one night, when his third cup of coffee has come for free, he begins to talk about how he stumbled in the elephant grass at a bend in the road near Pleiku. When he stood up again, under a full moon that night, he saw that another man had joined him there. I still think he had those black pajamas they told us about, he tells her. And he conjures in that empty space again as he says how both of them stared at one another for a moment, then walked away that night, maybe deciding that the other was a ghost and that place in the road should be left to carry on for itself.
Which again is a powerful image about a veteran of Vietnam.
Right.
You know, was kind of remembering and saying, did this really, you know, since it happened, oh, you know, a Vietnamese soldier and an American soldier see each other and not sure the other one's real.
Right.
They go the other way.
Exactly.
Or am I seeing a ghost?
Right, right.
And I don't know if it was a story you heard or something you made up.
I actually spoke to a Vietnam vet who said there was a lot of chaos. He was, you know, running from point A to point B, and at one point he stumbles on a road and looks up, and pretty sure he was looking at a Vietnamese soldier, and they just took off in different directions.
There you go.
And I thought, what would lead you to, you know, was your impulse not to just open fire on this guy?
Yeah.
You know, and there are so many great questions that are loaded in that. I mean,
a poem, sure.
Yeah, I mean, I just spoke to a former soldier who said that he heard, because you've got this, you know, just tradition of storytelling amongst warriors, and that he spoke to a guy who said that he was in a special operations unit, and they were in a neutral country on R&R, all the guys together, and someone kept buying them drinks, and finally they looked over and realized they saw the North Vietnamese unit they had been hunting and had been hunting them. They just kind of hailed one another and continued drinking.
That almost reminds you of the famous story that they made into a song about during World War I at Christmas, where I think the British and the Germans play soccer with one another.
It was the, yes, that was the first, I think it was the first Christmas. They had only been at war for a few months.
1914.
1914, yeah.
Yeah, and so it's sort of like that. Like, you know, the North Vietnamese, we're not at war right now. We're both in this bar and say, hey, how you doing?
Right, exactly.
And then we'll pick up our guns tomorrow.
Right. And there's a commonality, like, well, we're probably both working class guys.
Yeah.
We're both warriors.
Yeah.
We're both, you know, maybe guys who didn't want to be here right now, you know.
So that's interesting.
Yeah.
Now, I want to do three more.
Sure.
One more. I'll actually have you do two. I want to do one. But here's another one, and it's in this book.
Okay.
Cut Across the Body.
Yeah, this is...
It's early on in the book, I think.
Yeah, this is Masala Tea and Oranges is the name of this book.
Yes, Masala Tea and Oranges.
Yes, Masala Tea and Oranges. So, a cut across the body. Now, while you still sleep, I remember my first sensei telling me how the prisoners of samurai, when it was clear that the gleaming steel of a new sword would be tested on them, would sometimes eat rocks, a stone or two, maybe a handful of gravel, just to damage the craftsman's work as it opened them up, just to ruin the soul of a perfect straight edge.
See, that's great.
Thank you.
It's almost brief enough to be a haiku or something.
Right.
But
thank you.
And what's the story behind that? Or do you have a story with that one? Or
well,
no?
let me just, you know, I was left with that image.
Oh.
I mean, as I was practicing martial arts, a teacher of mine told us about this.
Told that story?
Yes, this kesa cut that the samurai would sometimes do, and so sometimes someone would say, well, you know, if they're going to open me up with this beloved sword of theirs, let me just ruin it as it cuts through my belly.
Swallow the stones.
I'm going to meet a stone, right. And I thought, wow, there's so much in that image. There's so, you know, that's so loaded. Let me just throw it out there and see what I can make of it. And I thought, you know, once again, often when people are so dedicated to conflict, that it's like, this is going to live on beyond me, you know. So what's going on in this relationship? You know, what point is this relationship when it's that metaphor is what works best for the speaker, you know?
And I don't know if you're influenced at all, because I used to do martial arts in your poetry with the East and Eastern philosophy, because that to poems is great when you talk about let each person figure it out for themselves, like a Zen koan. You know, there's no real answer, but it's something for you to reflect upon.
Right.
You know, and it's sort of, maybe you bring some of that into some of your poems.
I think so, because I found myself, I realized one day when someone said, what does that mean? That thing, what does that mean? And I was just like, you know, it's really not a point for me to sit here and say that. I mean, you know, just like with my students when I taught, they would say, what's the right answer? I'm like, well, I want you to go back and read the material and think about it. Right.
Well, some of the things, there is not exactly one meaning.
One meaning, exactly.
It means what it means for you.
That's very important, right.
Now, 2 more poems, because I'm going to say shift the gears a little. You do have some sensuality in some of your poems.
Sure.
And I know often it seems like the image of bare feet comes up.
It's someone else brought that up to me,
Yeah. So I'm not the first one to tell you that.
Right.
And but the 2 I have here, let me I put 3 down here, but there's I think one of the ones that I would have you read, because there's 3 of them. But maybe I'll give you the choice. Would you rather read billiards or beads?
Oh, you know what? Yeah, let's do billiards.
Okay, let's do billiards. That's in that book.
That's fun, yeah.
And then I have one of those sensual poems I want to read.
Okay. 34.
Someone asked me to read one, too.
Okay, great. Billiards. It is past noon on a Tuesday, and I find you shooting pool with the same old man as before. You have made a long rope out of your hair, and you talk sweetly to him, because he is the Dust Bowl man who walks the block. He is the bony, silent wisp of a Baltimore that knew milk wagons and colored-only signs, the one whose narrow eyes and thin, chapped mouth are always lost below the lip of a blue baseball cap. He is the one who talks to the black girls on their smoke breaks in the alley, telling them that he is such a dancer, such a lover, and is silent as you stretch yourself across the table to shatter a triangle of hard colored balls. The tight cotton of your t-shirt rides up your body like it did the day before, showing him the beads that you wear and the North African tan of your waist. You whisper along with the jukebox music, bite your lower lip, squinting at the wedge of color on its green felt home. And before you break it, you arch your back and toss him the Rapunzel braid that has hung, waiting on the other side of your face.
Yeah, there you go.
The block.
Yes, the block.
During the day you find some interesting tableaus played out.
It's different day at night, I would think.
It is. It is and it's not.
Oh, okay.
It is and it's not.
Was that your beat at one point?
You know, it wasn't. I worked in headquarters at various
so you're right
times.
near there.
So you're right next to it.
Gay Street, sure.
Yeah, sure. And I love it. Visitors, it's very Baltimore. Visitors find it fascinating. Like, so that's the police department? And
right by the block.
Yeah, right.
Like half a block away from the police department is the block.
Exactly. And so I would have occasion to walk through there, I would go to 7-Eleven to get my green tea, you know, and to walk through there and, you know, hey, Gillespie, how are you? And, you know, girls walking in and out, people, you know, coming in and out. And I just happened, I was talking to one young lady who was just in a alleyway. Oh, hey, how are you? Fine. And she said, well, I've got to go in and talk to this guy. And there was this older man who she would play pool with him.
Oh.
Every day. And it was just such a fascinating tableau that was played out. And I was wondering, you know, what did she mean to him? What did it mean to him to just play pool with this very young, attractive woman? She was a very intelligent, fascinating woman, and I wondered what this guy's story was. And I often wondered about the stories of the people that were down there in the middle of the day.
Right.
You know, what was going on in their lives that they were down there in the middle of the day, and what was going on, and you know, and how. And we talk about role playing. It's fascinating to talk about the question of who are you really versus the role that you're playing. I mean, and you know, when you get to know some of the people that work down there, and because obviously the thing is constantly presentation and affect. So again, Baltimore as a character, just such amazing fodder.
So this was really about 2 real people.
Yeah,
that poem.
Right, people that I didn't really know, but I just saw that moment. I observed. Yeah.
Don't find the one poem that I wanted to read. Let me see if I can find it. Oh, here it is. Actually, about the last poem in this book. It's called Exhibit. And I like that one. You should know that on days like this, I may want to show you off to the men. It will be in the summer, most likely, when the brown, squat men are digging up cobblestones and clanking their pickaxes against the rusty hides of pipes. It will be when they are taking their break, eating street food, watching the lunchtime women, and I will show you off to them. I will walk you past the dirty men, with their hands are full of stone and mud, and they will see that your hair is still wet and that your thighs are thick in the faded jeans. They will know, somehow, that you wear no underwear when the weather is warm, and a current of muttered Spanish will run amongst them when we pass. Because you are tall, I am touching the small of your back, and it is the height of summer.
Thank you.
You're welcome. What was that about?
Thank you very much. You know, that was one of those things you piece together. There's, you know, part of it was very much about the culture of not just men, but guys, kind of. And there's the culture of the moment. There's an unspoken moment that communicates amongst people. Sometimes just given that, one of my martial arts teachers called it that elegant moment. Mm-hmm. And it's about that question of authenticity too. Mm-hmm. Saying, you know what, I just derive a sensual pleasure from this. Mm-hmm. And just understand that this is, you know, and I don't know if I'm even really advocating for this guy, for this speaker, but it's just about that speaker being completely authentic with this woman.
Right.
And saying that there's something about his identity as a man that he has to fuel. So is she objectivized as that moment? Is he giving her a choice? Is he, you know, try to leave that open.
Right.
But the pivotal point of it is him saying, this is something that's part of my personal culture.
Mm-hmm.
You know.
Well, I think part of it, what spoke to me was to say, it's a way of, you know, a gentleman is showing he's proud of his woman. Mm-hmm. Like he says, I'm showing you off.
Right.
You know, not necessarily your possession, but I'm showing you off. I'm proud that you're on my arm or next to me.
Right.
That kind of thing. You can interpret it that way.
I think so. Yeah. I think that, you know, it probably is one of those things that fits into several different psychological slots. Yeah.
As good poems do.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Now, in the future, here we go. We're going to sum up that you say do you have other poems in you and you say some prose stuff too?
I have another book I've put together, so I'm searching for a publisher for that.
Poems?
Yes.
Okay, book 3.
yes, book 3. Yes, I've got book 3. I've got that here.
Okay,
and
prose.
I have some prose going. I have a novel. It's about 150 pages now.
Wow.
Kind of squaring away the first half of it, and then I've got another piece I'm going to do, and I've got a science fiction policing piece. I've going kind of looking down the line at what would become of policing as cities grow and populations are more diverse, and you know, so
something like Blade Runner.
You know, it's funny. I'm so struck. I mean, obviously, Blade Runner is one of those things that impacts you, and it's just there, right?
Yeah,
and so I always ask. I realize as I'm creating images, I'm like, okay, don't make it Blade Runner, but you know, but you can't help but have, you know, these images of what a city would look like, or, you know. So, you know, thank you to Philip K. Dick.
There you go.
Right.
Now the thing to do is then to say we will want to have you back when some of these things have been published, and we want to get it out there and get it promoted. We want to thank Ellen Cherry for letting us know about you. And
thank you, Ellen.
Because I know that it's all in the paper that the two of you were performing at that point at the Ivy Bookshop.
Yes.
And I said, well, I want her in, but then I also want him in because his life seems interesting. He has an interesting story to tell.
Thank you.
And you have.
Well, thank you.
Now, you let people here look in your camera, let them know about these two books, where to find them, and also your contact information, please.
Certainly. Well, this is on the later edition of Sancho Panza, which is one of the first poems in it, and that's available at the Ivy and at Atomic Books. And the cover is just a sword. Let's see if you can see this.
Yes,
it's got a katana, and this is called Masala Tea and Oranges. That's it's actually the first book that I did, and that's also at the Ivy and at Atomic Books, and I will be at BookFest
on
the 29th doing a panel
in September.
Yes,
terrific. We want to cover that one year. Maybe this will be the year.
Great, great, and yeah, so they're available at those two bookstores right now.
How about Amazon?
No, not Amazon.
Just the bookstores.
Right.
Okay, and give folks your contact information, how to find and contact and talk to Edward Doyle-Gillespie, and how much they love your poems and your books.
Thank you. Well, I'm on Facebook And that's really probably the primary place to find me.
Is Facebook.
Is Facebook, right?
Under your name, Edward Doyle-Gillespie.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. That's probably the best way to hunt me down.
Okay. Great.
I know I need to get one of these author sites.
Yes, of course.
Of course. Of course.
So we want to thank you again.
Thank you so much.
All right. Terrific.
It's a lot of fun.
Yeah, well, it was great to have you.
Thank you.
I was looking forward to this.
Very much. And I'm looking forward to coming back.
That's terrific. Because I think, with all I tell people, the bad things we've heard about crime in Baltimore and some bad things we've heard recently in the last few years, bad things about the Baltimore police force, I said, interviewing you and having you on the show will give people something positive about Baltimore and positive about a member of our hardworking police force.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I'm very proud to be a member. Very proud to be in Baltimore. I think of it from Baltimore, and I've lived here for 22 years.
Right.
So I'm proud to claim Baltimore, and I'm proud to claim the agency. I'm very proud of being a Baltimore City cop.
Well, that's terrific. Well, folks, that's the end of the latest edition of Books and Authors, and we hope to have another one soon with another interesting author. In fact, maybe at the book convention or the other convention we're going to be attending in September. So stay tuned for some more interesting people who have written some interesting books. So until then, this is Paul Stefan saying, see you next time.
You're watching Books and Authors on TV Free Baltimore.
Hello, this is Mary from TV Free Baltimore. I'm here at Turkey Point Marina, and I'm here with Lenny Rudo. He has started a wonderful new magazine called Fish Talk. Would you like to tell some of the passion about why you have started this?
Sure. Well, we anglers in the Mid-Atlantic region, and particularly in the Chesapeake, we care an awful lot about what's going on out there, and unfortunately we've had no publication for years and years, really ever since the recession hit and several went out of business. We've had no publication covering fishing in this area, either in print or on the web. So we started Fish Talk, which is both in print and on the web. We started up in April of last year, so we're now publishing the 15th edition. This is last month. This is our newest right here with that big beautiful black drum on the cover. Boy, I wish I caught him.
What areas are you mainly covering?
So we actually cover from Delaware clear down into Virginia. The Chesapeake Bay is where our heart is. It's where we're based at. But we also do cover the coastal fishing, Delaware, Maryland, Virginia. And we also cover freshwater in all three of those states, as well as D.C. and a little bit in Pennsylvania. It's really all the areas that any anglers living around here might want to go fish.
You keep us updated on the conditions and the amount of fish and other aspects of what's going on with the marina life and everything.
Absolutely. As far as the how-to, where-to information goes, we put it all right here in the magazine. This is your how-to, where-to. Now, of course, there's a time lag between when you prepare a magazine and when you actually print it, and that was always the weakness with fishing reports that appeared in any kind of print publication. So what we do is every week by noon on Friday, we update fishing reports that cover all the different areas that we just talked about. We have different reports for the Middle Chesapeake, for the Lower Chesapeake, for the Tangier Sound. All these areas, we call a bunch of folks in each different area. We talk to different charter boat captains, we talk to different tackle shops, and we get reports for all these different areas. Every Friday by noon, they're updated.
What is your mission?
You know what? It all boils down to helping you catch more, bigger fish. That's what it all comes down to. We have a ton of how-to, we have a ton of where-to. If you fish in this area, you're going to find the tactics, you're going to find the techniques that you need to know to catch drum like that and speckled trout like that.
What's your contact information?
Well, you can always go to fishtalkmag.com, spelled just like it sounds, fishtalkmag.com, and that'll take you right to the magazine online. From there you can find email. You can email me if you'd like. I'm always happy to get emails from readers. Send us reports, send us your fish pictures. We have an entire section in the magazine of reader photos where readers have sent in different fish pictures of the fish that they've caught. And people love being in print, so it's fun.
Where can you get the print?
Well, the print version is available in over 700 locations up and down the Mid-Atlantic region. Pretty much all the tackle shops have it. Lots of marinas have it. It's right here at Turkey Point. They've got it inside at the office. A lot of convenience stores have it. And of course, since we're, talking to fishermen, the liquor stores all have it too.
Oh, that's great. And the bait stores, right?
Absolutely.
And it's free?
It's completely free, yes. Please.
That's great.
Find a print version, take one home with you.
Okay, everybody out there, go out and look for Fish Talk, and you'll become a great fisherman. It's Mary from TV Free Baltimore. Thank you so much.
Hello, I'm Steve Darnall, the publisher of Nostalgia Digest, and you're watching TV Free Baltimore. Well done.
The Despotille is on my shore, Maryland, my Maryland. His torch is at thy temple door, Maryland, my Maryland. Our friends, the patriotic corps that fleck the streets of Baltimore, and be the battle queen of yore, Maryland, my Maryland. Thou wilt not cower in the dust, Maryland, my Maryland. Thy beaming sword shall never rust, Maryland, my Maryland. Remember Carroll's sacred trust, remember Howard's warlike thrust, and always onward with the just, Maryland, my Maryland.
This concludes another day of live stream broadcasting from TV Free Baltimore.